All right, ladies and gentlemen, I got a couple of fantastic guests for you this week, and I can't wait to chat with them and hear about what they've been up to lately. I've got Andrew Hamilton and Andrea Sansone. So thank you guys so much for joining me on the Do Big Things podcast, and I can't wait to hear what you've been up to. It seems like you're always doing something.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. It's great to be here.
Of
course. It's a lot different being able to see you.
I know. Yeah, this is nice.
Yeah.
Last time it was just on the phone, and I feel like I didn't do you any justice with the sound quality there. So we got to make up for that. So Andrew, you just had a big sojourn, the highest 100 peaks of Colorado, and you set the fastest known time for that. Let's just get into it, man. I want to hear all about it. And by the way, our mutual friend TJ Pitts mentioned that it didn't all go smoothly. he just said there was a lot of mishaps along the way. He said I don't remember exactly what he said, but he made it sound like someone almost died and a car broke down and all kinds of stuff was going on. So I can't wait to hear about it.
It was
dying was on day one.
Oh yeah, it was like all mishaps, basically.
It's starting from day one. It didn't go as planned. So we threw the plan out the window after Culebra, which was the first peak.
Whoa, no way.
Yeah, well, so basically the lead up to this thing was, I did the 14er record back in 2015.
Yes.
And, so that's Colorado 14ers in record time. And so after that, I was sort of like looking, well, what's the next big thing? What could I do after the 14ers? And so I sort of have had this Centennials idea on the radar since then. I started sort of thinking about routes to do it. I hadn't done all the Centennials. I mean, I actually didn't even get them done until I did the 100, this record thing. I still had a few, few out there that I hadn't quite finished. But so we started. So for the last 5 years, and at that time, nobody had done them in a single season before, but over these last 6 years, it's been done 3 times. Two guys basically spent the whole summer, on their bike out there by themselves, biking. Yep. And then there was another guy that had driven himself around, like as part of this 3 states big thing where he spent the summer out there. But the way I wanted to do it, just sort of like super fast with a support crew, that had never been done, and obviously with a support crew, you can do it really fast, faster than had been done. So anyway, we've spent like 5 years where a lot of our, trips that we've done over the summers and stuff were all sort of scouting trips kind of in a way, we're doing some out, maybe bringing the kids, but at the same time, we're just scouting out some routes just to see how they would work and how these link ups would work up for some of these peaks.
Yeah, some of these routes were like what he used in the record, such as the Centennial Elks Traverse. We did a big, we did that on foot a few years back. And then we did a big Weminuche wipeout trip, but we didn't do RGP in that trip. So that was something different that Andrew added in for the true Weminuche wipeout for this one. And then we also did, we scouted like Sneffels to Dallas, for example. And just a couple, like just big scouting trips like that really kind of got Andrew and I really excited for the possibility of this record coming to fruition.
Yeah. And for people that don't necessarily know what all those things are, like Centennials, Elks Traverse, and the Weminuche, stuff like that. I mean, we could probably get into that as we talk more.
For sure. Yeah. This is something you guys have been planning for a long time, though.
And actually, there was one year where I was probably about a week, and thank goodness it didn't work out. But it was a week from starting. I had my Culebra, ticket sort of paid for, and I had the train thing was all set to go. And then, there was like this big fire down, actually caused by the train that you usually take to get into the Chicago Basin area.
Do you remember the big
I do.
San Juan? So they closed the San Juan,
which had never happened in their history before. They had never actually closed the whole, San Juans down.
Yeah.
And so that sort of canceled it that year. And it seems like there was a couple other years where it was getting close, and then for whatever reason it just didn't happen. Like one year I got a job.
You got a job. Nice small detail. And then I guess the other year, last year, we did Holy Nolans, so that kind of took up a big chunk of just like our focus,
because it was a big thing. It's like I'd actually had like an 18-day plan, but I was expecting it to take about 20 days. Okay. Didn't quite even hit that because of all the bad luck we had. But it's just hard because, it's hard to find people that can take 3 weeks off or even a week, and so to have Andrea, it really made that possible, because you kind of need one person there that's there the whole time. It's just too hard if one person's there for a while and then they're gone, for someone else to come in and sort of learn the ropes like on the fly. It just wouldn't happen.
Really hard to have people coming in and out. It's just not ideal.
So logistically, it's just hard to pull off. It really is.
Yeah. So how many people did you have on your crew?
Yeah, so we had so obviously myself, and then our good friend Vince. He was Vince Noon. He was there with us the very first week. After that first week, he left, and Andrew's sister Laura and brother-in-law Dave came in, and they were there for about 10 days. And then after that, they left, and then I was on my own for the remainder of the time.
Okay. And
yes.
So how many days were you left on your own?
It was probably a week and a half.
Okay. Nice.
And so it was, basically everyone sort of fell into different roles. Vince was kind of there. He was, everything got scrapped like the original plan. He was going to be our sort of our San Juan 4-wheel drive guy, but then the whole plan got messed up. He ended up, it was great to have him though, because even where we were in the Sawatch, a lot of those roads were still pretty beaten up, so it was nice having him driving us around. It was
really cool. Yeah, like it was nice to be able to split the 4-wheel driving. He has a truck, and so we were able to split the 4-wheel driving. And when I was just tired and trying to figure out other plans, I was like, Vince, go get food, Vince, go carry his pack, go hike with him. I was like, Vince, you're the one getting up at 3 a.m. to go hike with him, because I'm not going to do that right now.
He was my pack man. So, I was following this thing called the 3,000 foot rule. So basically the idea is, in order to count a peak, when you're within 3,000 feet of the summit, either on the way up or down, you're on your own. Well, you can have people hike with you, but you have to carry all your own gear. You have to navigate on your own, stuff like that. But below that line, that 3,000 foot line, everything goes. People can carry your pack. I mean, they could carry you, if you could get a big enough crew.
Right.
But in the old days, I didn't necessarily like this rule. I kind of wanted to have a rule that was sort of just as fast as possible, kind of like you start start and finish, maybe, at a certain trailhead, but everything in the middle would be sort of fair game. Right. But now I've actually come to really appreciate this 3,000 foot rule, because it kind of protects this sort of record from, what I would not appreciate would be someone, you really want someone to really come in and study these peaks and really get to appreciate for them. And there's so many people that are just so much faster than me. I mean, they can run circles around me, but they could theoretically, you could just have a team of people. You could have experts in each area that would just come and guide you through.
I just like to say,
could just switch from team to team. So the 3,000 foot really, it sort of protects it. It keeps it hard, Yeah,
I like to say it just protects the style and the athlete's performance.
Totally.
Basically, and I had mentioned that on our Instagram story. I did this one slightly interactive kind of thing about the 3,000 foot rule, because actually there was one section. Andrew was headed up to Huron. Yeah, we were gonna hike up to Huron and support him up there and give him gear, food, and resupply him to go over to Ice and the Apostles and finish up.
Yeah, I was like, oh, it'll be easy. You guys just hike up the standard trail, meet me on top of Huron.
Right.
And so they're like, oh yeah, that's great.
So we were getting all packed up, and then I got this message from Andrew, and he was like, wait a minute, this isn't going to work. We can't, because of the 3,000 foot rule. So we ended up hiking into Clohesi Lake, and then giving support there and doing all of that. But what I like to say is it just really protects the athletes doing these types of mountaineering records in a way that
from the really fast people.
Yeah, from the really fast people, but also getting your gear carried, getting guided, and just it really it makes it harder. It makes it a lot harder, and it makes you do your own homework,
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Just before this conversation, I was out to dinner with my in-laws, and they were asking about, what I was doing tonight. And I mentioned you guys, and they're like, well, who are you guys talking to? And I was explaining, what you guys were up to over the summer. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure this guy has done like almost all the research as far as like how you get to the peak and then the route that he's taking up. And later on, people can come along and just kind of follow that if they want to. With the 3,000 rule, it sounds like nobody can just come along and snag it from you. They're going to have to work for it.
Well, they can look at his track online.
And that's a big deal. That's a big deal.
That's a big deal, right? To see how he links up these peaks.
Right.
But also at the same time, it's like, at least they still have to do the work when they're out there, right? And they can't just turn their brain off. They have to be like, even though they get that information via Andrew's tracks, they still have to use their brain out there, which still takes a little bit of work. But, you know, Andrew, he is okay with, you know, obviously his tracks being out there. Once it's done, you know?
You know, kind of part of the lore of like the 14er record was that, you know, like, before Roach's guidebook came along, Roach's book was kind of the big deal. It's sort of like, you know, it's this 14er guidebook that has several routes for each peak. Whereas, you know, books that came before him, it was limited like one or maybe two routes, you know? So his book, for me, it really opened up the doors for like thinking of ways to link these peaks up. But the lore of the old record is like, you know, nobody, like the person who held the record, they would keep their routes closely guarded, you know, these secretive. And I remember Cave Dog mentioning that he was calling around some of the former record holders and trying to get, you know, information on routes and how nobody would want to talk to him about it and stuff like that. Yeah. But back then, you know, you didn't wear a tracker, you know, there was no way to prove what you did. It was sort of, you know, it was all, you know, on your word. And I do think it's better now because, you know, you can prove it, you know, you've got your tracker and stuff like that. But the downside is that, yeah, if you did have some brilliant route, you know, it's out there in public, you know, once you've done it, you know, people can see it.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, just having the route, I'll just tell you from my experience, like, man, it's still rough when conditions aren't perfect and it's nice.
I can only imagine
a whiteout. I mean, yeah, it's like just having that line on your phone. It isn't the whole ball game, you know?
So what apps are you usually using out there? Are you using an app on your phone or just like a Spot or a Delorme, or what are you using?
Well, you know, the tracker is a Garmin tracker. It used to be DeLorme, right?
Okay, yeah.
And so it's basically a GPS. Like it actually serves a double purpose. Like the original reason I got that tracker was because you know, then people could follow along online. You know, they go to your little link and they can hit refresh and see where you're at. So it serves that purpose. It's also a great one in that you can send text through it, you know, so you can communicate even when you don't have phone service. And then the other benefit is it's basically a GPS, and it's now actually, you know, I think I mentioned it was DeLorme, but now it's run by Garmin. And so it's basically a GPS. And so the app that comes with it is called Earthmates. And so, you know, I don't think it's necessarily the best navigation app. There's some I've seen, like Gaia is a really good one. And you know, the GPS that you're just like my iPhone automatically has, that's pretty amazing. Like, as far as, you know, like it doesn't need my satellite tracker to figure out where we are. You know, I don't think it ever really needs it. But with the tracker connected, it's able to leave me that track, you know, to sort of follow back on.
It's nice. You can download maps and stuff.
Yeah. So we're getting better at it. But so I primarily use Earthmate, which is what came with that one. You know, but there's a lot of options for people that say didn't want to have the tracker, you know.
And what's really nice about what we did is you get so many messages, you get like 40, and then it gets super expensive. But what was brilliant was his sister Laura was like, oh, you should just get unlimited messaging. And so that's what we did. And we downloaded or got the unlimited messaging, and it's really saved us. We probably sent out close to 1,000 messages.
Probably, yeah. It just made it whereas we used to have to be super stingy, you know, and I'd be like, Andrea, make sure you use up all 160 characters.
Yeah, because
of each
I'm a texter. I'm like, hey, enter. How's it going? Enter. Do you want dinner? Enter.
There was one month where that cost me like $150, and so I used to be pretty stingy. But then it was like, oh yeah, you know, it was like an extra $15 in the month and unlimited messages. So that's what we did.
And it really saved us. You know, it saved us just so much. Throughout the record. It was really awesome. Yeah.
No, that's a pro tip right there. I like it. So how did you tackle this whole thing? Like you're familiar with almost all of these peaks. It sounds like there's a few 13ers you hadn't done before. like the Sawatch area? Did you just tackle that Nolan style and then move on from there? Or what did this look like?
Well, okay. So let's see. Well, I mean, I bet, the Sawatch, it was interesting. That's kind of like our home base, but sort of to go back, like I could maybe tell you. So like the way we're tackling this was, I had this plan, so the way I've described this to people is like the 14er record. And I've forgotten a lot of the pain of that record. It feels like it was everything went so smoothly because I had this plan, and I had failed the year before and I'd learned a lot in failing. I had made it I was like 10 peaks from the finish and I just couldn't go on because of an injury. But I learned so much in that failure that the next year I came back and I just had the splits were down, and I was nailing those splits. Even though with bad weather, we were still hitting the splits. And so it was like, I described that as like this choreographed ballet, where it's like everyone's just coming in at just the right time and everything was going well, even though we had our dramatic moments where this landslides and, bad weather and all this stuff, but everything went perfect and it was just so smooth the way it followed the plan, right? Whereas this time, I describe it as like there's a saying that says that no battle plan ever survives first contact with the enemy. And that's what this one was like. I had the plan and, I spent several days, trying to fine tune it. And I had a plan A, I had a plan B, depending on certain factors. And it got completely shredded, even really before we started because of the weather, so a couple days before we were supposed to start, there was a bunch of smoke in the air and I was like, oh man, it's going to be another smoky year. How am I going to do with breathing? And then all of a sudden it just flips and it was showing just like as far out as the app would show monsoons, like the monsoons came early. And that's one of the reasons I start in like late June is I'm trying to avoid the monsoon weather.
It wasn't really monsoon. It was snow and cold weather.
Really?
And so it wasn't just your afternoon thunderstorm.
Yeah.
It was all out every day cold weather.
And yeah, I guess there was
snow.
And there is good news. Like, so when you have a cold front mixed with the moisture, you don't get as much lightning storms, because lightning likes to have heat with moisture. That's generally what causes your big lightning storms. And I hate dealing with lightning. But the cold, man, so it was snowing on all these peaks and stuff, right? And so I got a little nervous at the beginning and we decided, well, we could postpone a little bit, so we decided to postpone it. And then during all this, 3 of the peaks actually were shut off, like to access. There's these 3 peaks. Actually, there's 4, but one of them's kind of unofficial. They're called the Calibron. And the owner kind of got freaked out about, liability and stuff. Yeah. So he just shut the peaks down. So now people, and the deal was, what the word was, is that they were going to get it opened up. He was just talking to his lawyers, like, what can he do to protect himself and stuff like that. But we didn't know if they were going to be open or not, So like, well, what am I going to do? Because I don't want to have a big asterisk on this thing. Well, he didn't do these 3 peats. And so I didn't know what I was going to do. So that was this factor. And, so then I was like, well, how am I going to deal with that? Because I didn't want to go publicly do them illegally and be public about it, because I feel like that could hurt the efforts to open it. There'd be a lot of people that would have been upset about that. Right. And on the other hand, I thought about secretly doing them and not telling anybody. And then later, if anyone else was like, well, you've got an asterisk, then I could break out the secret track and be like, aha, I did do them, you sucker, And so but I didn't know how to handle that. So that was this big, thing I didn't know how to deal with. And so, we've got this weather, we've got that. And then another thing was the San Juans, I didn't really know like the time it was going to take to do some of this stuff. And Calabra's another kind of problem, because when you schedule, like Calabra's privately owned, and at least they're nice enough to let people climb it, whereas in some years it's been closed as well. But so you pick your day, you pay for a day,
we
and
just
you have to
no
show up at 6 o'clock in the morning. And we've had a contact there where they were a little more flexible with us, but this time no flexibility. And so I was stressed about, well, crap, what if it takes me too long in this spot? How are we going to get to Calabra? And what if we miss Calabra? Then the whole thing's over. Right. And so with this whole, so this is happening days before the thing's starting, and so anyway, one of the first things I decided after talking to my sister was, well, not being able to do those 3 peaks, maybe what I should do is add in a couple of smaller sort of sub records in there that would be cool. So even if I couldn't finish the whole Centennials, well, these would be kind of cool standalone records on their own. So one of those was one Andrea and I had scouted. We called the Centennial Elks Traverse. And it's basically doing all of the Centennial peaks. So that includes all the 14ers and the highest, 13ers in the Elks in one push. And that's not the most efficient way to do that if you're going for speed. Like, if I, like in the 14er record, I did sort of Castle by itself, and then you get driven over and do the others in a separate little grouping, right? But it's really cool to do it all together. I like that style. And that is this amazing grouping of traverses. Like, you just can't beat that anywhere in the state.
Really?
The classic traverses. So the classic 14er traverse there that you'd be aware of would be like the Maroon Bells traverse. It's kind of, a classic traverse. But when you do the 3 extra Centennials in this, now you've got, and these are traverses that aren't commonly done, but like Cathedral to Castle, like it's hard to find any information on that one. And it's got some difficult sections. Thunder Pyramid to Pyramid, which is like the Bells traverse, only it feels much more difficult because it's just loose. It's like a loose version of the Maroon Bells traverse. And then Hagerman to Snowmass, which is just that gray rock on Snowmass. It just, you never know when a rock you're standing on is going to fall away from you. Andrea and I have scouted that, and it was pretty intimidating. And then, of course, going from Snowmass to Capitol, which I'm really familiar with, but it's still difficult. So that's a classic route. So I was like, okay, well, I'll just do that as one big link up. And that by itself is cool. There's a record for that on the FKT site. And so I'd go for that. And then the other big one, which Andrea mentioned before, the San Juans is probably the best area of mountains in the state because it's much more remote than anywhere else as far as the mountains are considered. Most of the Colorado's ranges are linear, and they're usually, big towns nearby and stuff like that. But the San Juans, you're just sort of, you're up, you can actually get on peaks where you don't see a city,
Right.
And so the most remote part of the San Juans is called the Weminuche Wilderness. And there's this great set of peaks back there. And if you can link them all up, and we've called that the Weminuche Wipeout, but we never did Rio Grande Pyramid, which is one of the Centennials that stands way off by itself. So I was like, man, it'd be cool to do a real Weminuche Wipeout where you get all the Weminuche plus Rio Grande. And again, it was horribly inefficient in terms of like speed, because I basically spent an entire day hiking from Rio Grande Pyramid just to get over to the next one, Vestal.
Yeah. And
So, but the good news is that if the Centennial thing didn't work out, I'd still have these 2 great sub records.
Okay.
The bad news is it was hard. It was really hard. And it was like logistically, it was kind of hard to set those up.
Yeah. So with all that to say, we, at the beginning of this record, we went into this basically with our plan kind of out the window. And so taking it back to your question of the Sawatch and how we linked those up, we were kind of taking it day by day. And so when we started this, we were in contact with our friend Chris Tomer, and
well, let me tell the story of the first day, because that would be a good segue into what you're talking about.
That'd
be a good segue. Yeah. So I mentioned all this stuff, and so it was sort of changing the plan, and then the last part there was finally I was like, well, and then we could also start with Culebra, and then I wouldn't have to worry about getting there,
right?
And anymore, and that, like, again, on the 14er record, that wouldn't have worked because that is such a fine-tuned record, and you don't have a lot of like time to spare to pull off something like that. But in this record, where I was sort of establishing it, that was going to be okay, and then we wouldn't be as stressed out, So and then with the 3 peaks that were closed, I came up with this plan to do the next highest 3 on the list, and so that way, if I couldn't do DeCalibron when we got there, we could just call it the legal highest 100 or something like that. So that was sort of like, but it was hard to do those extra 3, So that's kind of all the stuff that was going on at the beginning. And so anyway, we get started. And we're sort of right in the middle of this snowy weather pattern. And so Andrea hikes up Culebra with me, and it was like sort of this light rain at first, and we get up high on the ridge, and there's a couple of inches of snow. It was actually still a really pleasant hike, even though it was kind of treacherous. When you have a couple of inches on these rocks, and those rocks on Culebra, I mean, they're all covered with lichen, and so they're very slippery, so it's a little treacherous. But we did that. We had a great hike, though, I thought, and we came down, and it was actually, things were looking good. The skies kind of cleared, but I was kind of thinking, like, with that much snow, I didn't want, like, the plan was kind of, we were going to head dead to the Weminuche Wipeout, but that has some really technical peaks on it. It's got what I consider the hardest of the Centennials, Jagged. It's also got probably my favorite, like, route on the whole thing, which is the Wham Ridge on Vestal, which is like this ramp And I just found out it's not actually granite. I was calling it a granite slab. It's not granite. It's something else that's unique down there. But it's this amazing route. But with that kind of snow on it, I wasn't going to touch it. You know, I was like, you got it. Yeah, there's no way I wanted to go now. So we came up with this plan B, which was like, well, let's just head up to the Sawatch, which is kind of like our home field advantage ground, you know, because of the Nolans, we've done that so many times, and all the scouting we've done up there. And it's like, because I can deal with whatever weather it's thrown at us up there. And so let's just go up there and see if we can like just get through this like bad weather patch, right? So on the way, we're going really close to these 3 peaks of the San Juans that kind of stand off by themselves, that are kind of known as gentle, kind of boring peaks as far as the San Juans are considered. You got San Luis, and then 2 13ers called Phoenix and Stewart. And they're all connected on this long ridge. And I had scouted Phoenix, but I'd never done this ridge before. And, you know, when we got to the trailhead, it was hot. Now the sun was out, everything was dried up, you know. And so I kind of maybe didn't pack as much warm stuff as I had been planning on packing after that morning on Culebra. And so, you know, I started hiking up there, and near the summit of Phoenix, it started raining again. You know, it's getting towards the evening now, because, you know, we had driven all the way out there after climbing Culebra and stuff. And it's rained, so that got me pretty wet. And then it turned into this snowstorm, and it ended up becoming this like full-on blizzard, like that lasted for several hours into the night, like at least until like midnight or 1 o'clock, where I was like doing things like going the wrong way off the ridge and not realizing it because it was such a whiteout. And the only thing that saved me was my phone, you know, and my hands were frozen, and so I didn't always have my phone out. But every once in a while, I'd be like, gosh, I better check. And sure enough, I'd be like going off some little sub ridge. And so I'd have to get myself back on track. And anyway, it was a pretty disastrous night. I was, you know, I mean, I had thoughts like, I mean, it's hard to believe this is day one.
Right.
And I was just getting thrashed out there just because I was so cold. And I couldn't believe the amount of snow. And then I had completely underestimated this ridge, because I had never done the ridge before. You know, in the scouting, I had gone up Phoenix, but not connected it with San Luis. On the map, it looks like it's like, 3 inches, you know, on this ridge. It looks like a piece of cake, you know. But there were so many ups and downs, and like spots where you could get, if you lost the main route, you'd be in class 4 sort of cliffy stuff. And so it was brutal. And basically, to make a long story short, you know, it was cold, I was frozen, and I didn't get out of there until morning, you know. And anyway, one of the cool pictures I thought from this thing is when I was coming in, and it's just dawn, and you know, I had planned on being done at like midnight, and I got in at like 6 in the morning, you know. And so Vince took a picture of me as I was coming in. And what's impressive about the picture is the mountain behind me is solid white. I mean, the entire mountain is just white. You know, normally you just don't see the mountains get pounded like that, you know, in a summer storm. And I was so cold up there. And I mean, I was literally thinking, if I had dropped my phone, I probably would have died. Like, I wouldn't have known where to go, or I would have ended up some random valley, you know. And so that was the story about, you know, people almost dying, you know. I mean, just because I was so cold, or like if there was nowhere to stop and take cover, the wind was blowing and it was so cold out there. And so anyway, in my mind, I thought it didn't make any sense to go on. I was kind of ready to quit. I mean, I think I spent the last few hours hiking out. I was sort of like in my mind, you know, thinking, well, you know, it's like, well, obviously I'm going to quit. Like, why would I keep going on? Look, this night was supposed to be easy. And my tendons were already beat up as if I'd been on like this 8-day backpacking trip, is what it felt like, you know, which we normally do, and I'm fine. But here I was on day 1, and just, you know, when you're hiking on snow on like loose rock terrain, you can't see the loose rocks. And so your tendons kind of take a thrashing because you can't like anticipate. I don't know, being able to see it just makes a big difference. And so here I am, I'm all beat up, and I'm thinking, well, you know, we got 3 weeks off, you know, we could make a great vacation out of it, go pick up the kids, we could go hike some of these peaks. And I thought it was kind of a done deal. I was like, well, yeah, Andrea's going to love this idea. It'd be great. We'll just quit. And Culebra seemed like, you know, ages ago. Like, it didn't seem like it was even, you know, the same year. It just seemed so far away. That's how sort of like just mentally beat up I'd been. But then, so I get to the car, and Andrea's like, didn't want to hear like I'm quitting, you know. She would hear nothing of it. And that's when she was like, started talking to Chris Tomer, and so he's the weather guy for Fox News. He also specializes in like mountain forecasting, so he's a great resource to have. He's very accurate. It's like uncanny how accurate his forecasts are usually. And so that's when we sort of get into what Andrea was going to talk about earlier, like heading to the Sawatch. basically from that point on, I don't think we really ever looked at the plan, you know, or at least I didn't. And we basically switched to this mode of like just taking it day by day, you know, because that's which, you know, that was the plan now. Well, let's just go into a saw watch. And if we, you know, we can talk to Chris and maybe he'll be able to say, hey, this might be a good time to go get the elks, you know, because I didn't want to go into the elks.
So he would link up peaks in the saw watch, and then we would talk to Chris and be like, well, where should we go? And then Chris would tell us, well, either stay west or go here. And so we left a lot of peaks individually in the saw watch that were good single days. Hey, we'll leave off Yale because we can get Yale. And we ended up just leaving a couple peaks off to get to pick up the pieces later. So there were pieces of the saw watch that he did that were part of the Nolan's route, but he didn't, you know, just go and knock them all out just because we were really following the weather and running from the weather versus how efficiently can we link up these peaks anymore? You know, after we knew about the weather and how inefficient, you know, this is going to be because we're going from, you know, range to range, we just realized that, hey, let's do these great link ups and we're just going to have a great record and we'll finish in however many days we finish.
But so like my first, like in the saw watch, you know, the first day it was kind of snowy again. And I was a little disappointed because I was just moving slow now. You know, I was moving much slower than I did in Nolan's, you know, and now I sort of, when we got to saw watch, I started with like Shibano Taba watch, which is how usually you start Nolan's. And yeah, so I was a little disappointed there, but there was like a few inches of snow up there as well, you know, so it just makes it for slow going. Yep. And so then the next day I did kind of my biggest like saw watch link up, and this was kind of a cool route. So, but I did, just because of timing and stuff, we decided to skip Yale, and we had skipped year A, which is a Centennial, like that sort of starts the saw watch too. So we're, like she mentioned, we're leaving some singles off, and we just figure, well, it's not super efficient to do that, but we'll just come pick up the pieces later, you know. And so anyway, I did this route. It was, so it's familiar to Nolan's people. It's so I started with Columbia, Harvard, then Oxford, Belford, Missouri. And then at that point you break off and you go do Iowa and Emerald, which are a couple Centennials. And then you drop down and then you're back on Huron, which is part of Nolan's again. Yep. But then from Huron, you have to go do Ice Mountain and North Apostle. And that is not an easy traverse, you know, like there was one time we spent a whole day scouting out this route. And so, but I didn't remember that route at all. I mean, it wasn't in my mind at all, but, you know, so, and I didn't really want to be on, you know, some of that stuff in the dark, you know, but as it turned out, there was a steep snowfill on Huron, which I think a lot of early Nolan's people have run into. And, you know, it's just really steep, and that really slowed me down. And so then I get, you know, I start traversing, you know, and I've got the route on my phone and I'm following it. And I get to the spot where I feel like I'm just surrounded by cliffs and vertical snowfields. And I just, nothing made sense to me. And I was, you know, it was like 3 a.m. So I was really tired. So in that spot, I just decided to stop and just wait for it to get light, you know? So I took a nap and shivered for a while. And then once it got light, I kind of like, finally, I remembered what we had done. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't easy. Which is why I couldn't figure it out in the dark, you know? Yeah. And so that was probably my favorite sort of like link up in the saw watch, just because that's a big day, you know, all those peaks I listed off. Yep. You know, but then I got out of there kind of late. But then, you know, Chris had sort of mentioned on that day, he's like, hey, it might be a good day. You know, tomorrow might be a good time to get over to the Elks. Okay. You know, and so that night we knocked off La Plata. Just Andrea came up with me, and we got hammered with rain that night. You know, up there we got really wet, and so then we just left. We left Hope, which was right there, which is kind of sad because it's a long drive to come back and get it. But and we headed for the Elks, you know, because we needed to get a nicely timed start on the Elks. And so that's when we did the Elks Traverse, which I talked about a little bit earlier. That the Elks Traverse, you know, and then the Wemmenooch Wipeout being like my favorite link ups of the whole thing, just because of how massive they are. You know, so anyway, we drove over there and we got going. And the one thing, now that was a tough one to set up the logistics, because the plan on that one was to have Andrea meet me like halfway through with like a tent, you know, and a sleeping bag. And then I could like basically do half of it, meet her down kind of near Crater Lake, which is near Maroon Lake, and get resupplied and take a nap for a while and then get going from there. But the problem is they've instituted all this crazy shuttle rules now out there. So you can't just like show up and drive up there for her. It was like, we didn't actually know how she was going to get there. And so they sort of said, well, see you later. And then Andrea had to go spend the day figuring out how to get like up there to meet me.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of a pain. Originally, she was going to ride my bike up there, which is way too big for her, with a giant backpacking pack on. And I'm glad she was able to figure it out without
Laura
that. That
ended
would have
up
been
texting
impossible.
me, and we ended up getting it just set up, so I was able to take the shuttle up, which was great. I mean, the pack was so heavy, and that comes in kind of later when we met Andrew from the Weminuche Wipeout. When I hiked in from Mullis Pass, I hiked in with Dave, Laura's husband, and I really needed him. There was a possibility of him not being there, but from my experience of hiking up the Bells to set up camp and all that stuff, like his pack, just the pack was so heavy. I had so much gear in there. And just to think, I was so crazy to think that I was actually going to bike up 10 miles with this huge pack. I couldn't even, it was crazy. I couldn't even walk. And I was like, how am I going to do this? So it was definitely a challenge. And so it was cool that Dave was able to be with me hiking in from Mullis Pass, because that was another huge support day where I hiked in from Mullis Pass with all this exact same camping gear and all the food. And we met at a camp spot about 7 miles in. And then from that camp spot is where we would hike into Vestal Basin. And then from there, hike up to, get Vestal, Trinity. And then we were going to hike down to Balsam Lake. And then the original plan was for me to go up and over Jagged. And so I was like, how am I going to do this with a huge pack? Originally, when we were packing, I felt the pack that we prepped and everything. I was like, it's fine. I'll be fine. Yeah, don't worry about me. And it wasn't fine.
It was really heavy.
It was so heavy. I mean, and usually I'm good. We do these huge, backpack trips, scouting trips, whatever. And we have these big, heavy packs, but to have a huge pack for an account for 2 people is just a different ball game.
Totally. I should mention one really cool thing about those trackers we have is that when you send messages between the trackers, that you can see the location that they sent their message from.
Okay.
And so she got down to a spot. She's like, hey, I'm right here. Like I set up the tent, here I am. And then I can see where she was. And so I can just follow that on my tracker and follow and zero right in on the spot. So that's kind of cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
So it sounds like this wasn't really done in the most efficient way. Like you got it done and you still set the record, but it sounds like you could probably take time off if you wanted to.
Right. Yeah, and so one of the for the Elks Traverse, once he decided to do the Centennial Elks, it's like, well, I mean, obviously he could have been driven from Castle to Pyramid, that would have saved a ton of time. And then also I had originally suggested for the Weminuche Wipeout, like, hey, what if you don't add in RGP? What if we just do RGP and then drive you to Vestal? Let's just forget that huge link up where your tendons are hurting. You're just hurting right now. It just probably wouldn't, it would just make sense to just forget that. But he was super insistent.
Well, just like Andrea's stubborn, I'm a little stubborn sometimes too.
And it makes sense.
No, it's too cool to do.
But also doing Rio Grande Pyramid by itself is really long. It's like 17 miles
or 20. It's like 20 miles.
Yeah, and so do it individually. I mean, you're still going to have the miles, but it would at least have been on a trail, which is what I was thinking. I'm like, you're not going to be going up and over these rugged passes and then have nothing to show for it except, but then at the end, obviously you have the whole Weminuche Wipeout, which is pretty cool.
Wow.
And at this point, for me, at least, I'm not a super fast guy, like compared to other people that set FKTs, they can run circles around me. I mean, if you talk about some of the fastest times on like shorter events, right? But this was really just about survival. I mean, after that first day when I told you we sort of switched from having this plan that got ripped up to going day by day, I had no idea how long I'd been out there, like zero idea. I didn't know how many peaks I'd climbed. It was just like, well, what are we doing tomorrow? What are we doing the next day?
And we didn't know what we were doing the next day. That was basically all a lot of determination of where we were going, which range we were going to be in was via Chris. And then once we decided which range we were going to, then we decided on which peaks we were doing.
And later, kind of later in the thing, when they were like, yeah, it looks like you're on scheduled to be about 21 and a half days, which didn't come to fruition, but it ended up being like 22 and a half. But I was like, holy crap, are you serious? That's amazing. Because
we were thinking like 25 days.
Far behind,
really?
Yeah. So I was super thrilled that it managed, even though I think, in the end, it might be that I had been planning on like 4 hours of sleep every night, plus you always figure like an hour on each end of that. So there's probably 6 hours planned of downtime every night just to sleep, because I wanted to make this sustainable. So a lot of that just got axed. And so maybe that's why it wasn't as, because I did have this 18-day plan, but I kind of, in hindsight, I know now that a couple of those days were impossible that I had planned for myself. And so, but 20 days, I still think could be possible. So if someone came in, really fine-tune the route, they could definitely, I think 20 days is still achievable, but it's still, it's 20, it's like 3 weeks of you're just brutalizing yourself, and you never know what the conditions are going to be. So it really is just this survival, can you survive? And so I didn't care so much about the actual end time. I'm just thrilled that we made it and that I didn't quit,
No kidding.
Which kind of brings us back to day one when, we did so much planning for this. And so when he's got this brilliant plan in his head to, quit and go on a family vacation, I'm just like, because I know if I had agreed to that, he would have in 5 seconds quit and been like, great, we're gonna be done. And so he was just thinking, that he wanted to be done, and how could he go on? And honestly, it was the first week of just crap weather. It was snowing, but I knew that towards the end of the week the weather was gonna clear up. But so I just had to, kind of, I don't know, make it sound a little bit more rainbows and butterflies for him.
So she lied to me, basically.
I told him the weather was going to clear on Thursday, and it wasn't really going to clear till like Saturday.
That's a good crew member right there.
Right. So then it was just kind of like, so then he agreed and I was like, let's just take it one day at a time. The next day, so we're going to go do Princeton tonight, and then we'll see what happens. And then, in the very beginning, his tendons were just totally shot. And like he was talking about, and finally going up Princeton after we kind of were playing with some meds and stuff, he was feeling a lot better, and which is great. And so he, I had some hope on Princeton, even though we did Princeton in a snowstorm. Actually going up was okay. It was kind of more like 1,000 feet from the summit, started snowing and stuff on us again. But so, which is why we had gone to the Salwatch. It's like, well, we can handle bad weather in the Salwatch. So
even Princeton, I mean, man, it was like fogged in kind of.
Yeah. And that, it was a pain in the butt route finding. It kind of sucked.
Princeton 30 times at least, and I still lost the trail on the way up.
Yeah.
It's really frustrating. It's like I wasn't like lost, but it was like,
you
just
kind
nice
of
to be on the trail,
kind of lose the trail, and then you find out you're like 50 feet above it, and then there's a beautiful trail below you, and while in the meantime we're doing this boulder hopping through this huge rock fall, so it's just, so all that to say, we just didn't quit, and
Andrea wanted to get this off the list.
Yeah.
If I quit, she knew that would be like next year's thing.
Sure.
And look, we've got other plans. Sorry.
I'm not coming out here for this next year. You better finish this year.
Got more stuff that we're planning for. So this is a one and done.
Yes. See, that's teamwork right there. That's perfect.
Yeah. And we knew it wasn't going to be efficient in logistics. And that's fine. Once we kind of got that in our heads, we got the plan out the window. It kind of became about doing the best we can with finishing as efficiently as we can for what it is handed to us in front of us. We just kind of, what we're dealt with, then we roll with it.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. And sounds like you did the right thing. Andrea, I'm curious, like what this whole project looks like from your point of view. And it sounds like you did a bunch of hiking and climbing with Andrew. Do you know how many peaks you climbed or how much mileage you put on out there? And what was your planning like trying to map this whole thing out?
Yeah. So there's a lot of miles on foot for me. Like, also, even if it wasn't peak climbing,
sure,
well, I will say, let me interject one thing here before she goes on, but like she wanted to use this as an excuse to get into shape too.
Okay,
so
cool.
it wasn't all me just brutalizing my support crew. She wanted to, like, so I had a whole.
No, he's just saying that he needed me.
I had this whole.
He wouldn't have been able to do this without me climbing some of those
plan,
peaks.
and on this big-long plan, I had all these peaks listed. But I always put on there optional, Andrea could do this one with me. This one would make sense. That one would make sense. And they were usually like one-off ones because obviously there were certain ones that she couldn't do because she had to go to the car and drive around and meet me.
Right. So I basically, I climbed the peaks that I could that support would allow. Right. So which actually it did make support a lot harder for me, but I was willing to, experience the
she
undertaking.
Wanted it. Yeah, she wanted
and it was good. It really tested me physically, mentally, emotionally, all the things,
Right.
And but honestly, with that to say, I think that Andrew did appreciate me on some of those peaks. He always hiked better when I was with him, and so I think that there were a lot of peaks that he needed me for that pick me up, or just to be with him, and just for that moral, emotional, just that mental, emotional support. So, but yeah, so I did a lot of.
Oh, and I was going to say, as part of the 3,000-foot rule, you can have people with you. They can't guide you and stuff like that. But, it's still just having someone there with you. It just mentally, it's nice.
Oh yeah. I mean, even like on Holy Cross, I'm carrying his pack up the first 1,000 feet, down the next 1,000 feet, because there's just this up and down, and I'm like, and then, no, it was good, but and then
I'd be watching the altimeter and be like, okay, you can go another 20 feet,
and then carrying his pack up hikes, and then carrying his pack out of Chicago Basin, it's just it's just like, I'm like, I'm tired,
right.
But I did it, I carried it for him. But yeah, so like a lot of hiking in like to Clohisi Lake, hiking up the Maroon Bells, hiking into Chicago Basin, which is a whole story in and of itself. That was like 28 miles round trip for a burrito,
that was a good story because what I was up to, I was off in the wilderness and I was basically out of food. I mean, that was actually, man, we haven't even really gotten into the wipeout.
Yeah. So this was when we hiked in from Molas Pass, another big one. I hiked in from Molas Pass. I had food ready for him, right? So I had to prep him for that, and then so then from our campsite, we hiked into Vestal Basin, and then he went and he did Vestal, and then I met him at the saddle with Dave, and then I went on ahead and did Trinity with him. And then the plan was to move on to Jagged, which we realized that I would have been hiking out by 6 a.m. and then had to hike in to meet him for Chicago Basin. Just didn't make sense. And so basically I hiked down to Balsam Lake with him. And so we did all of our resupply, and I had this big bag of food, and I'm like, great, this should be good. Usually as support crew person, I usually know his caloric needs, what he's going to eat, what he's not going to eat, how much. And usually I always end up packing too much. It's what he needs, but he doesn't eat it. And so when we were down there and getting all his resupply, I was like, here's all your food. This should be great. And so for him to have run out of food, for me to have to hike in with, this burrito, it's kind of like, oh man, like kind of like a failure feeling on my end. Cause it's like, well, I should have packed more food, but he always comes back with all of the food left in his bag. Not all of it, but a lot of it. And I'm like, dude, eat your food,
I never blamed you. You thought it was your fault for there being less food.
Oh,
one
no,
of the
I know.
One of the issues was too, was I kept getting rained on. So I was hunkering down a lot. And so while I was hunkering down, I was just eating.
Right.
You know, and so that doesn't usually happen.
So it was just a huge surprise that he didn't finish his food, because he always has food left over. Yeah. And so with that, so that was like, I guess we can tell that story now.
Yeah. Well, so, we sort of mentioned, we'll sort of back up and sort of talk about this Wemmenooch wipeout, just because, this one deserves extra time, just because it was like 3 days out there, sort of like on foot, with no car for me. Right. Yeah. And so it's sort of this big thing, on the 14er record, you're never out that long on your own, not even close. It's usually, 8 hours done, drive, get resupplied, 8 hours. You've always got a light pack on, you're never carrying a lot of gear. So 3 days, that's significant, And so anyway, started with Rio Grande Pyramid, which she keeps referring to as RGP, which is, I think that's what people that know them refer to as RGP. So I'll call it that from now on too. And so then from there, I had never done this cross country route from RGP over to Vestal, which on the map, it's really far out there. Like RGP is like the most remote of all the Centennials in terms of being near 14ers. It's just not by any, it's all the way by itself. In fact, Roach even has a route in his book that's a 50-mile round trip to get to the Like, and that's just unheard of, right? So it's out there. And it's kind of neat because, well, it's kind of sad, but it gives it this like Mordor-like feeling, like scorched Middle Earth, because all the forest in the area is dead because of the beetle. And so it's kind of sad to see these like, sprawling forests that would normally be green and beautiful. They're brown, and so it makes me fear for the future of the area, because all those trees are going to start falling down, and it'll just be a mess. It's almost kind of like, I don't want any more forest fires, but that area really would probably benefit from burning, all that stuff up. In 50 years, it'd probably be a lot better off. But anyway, so that was all sort of like area that I had just looked at on satellite maps and like penciled in an area that I'm hoping it's going to go, and so, and at this point we're pretty far along. We're at least a third into this thing. And I was just recovering from having, being swollen, and, it was hard. It was hot when I started. It was like a brutal beginning to that thing. And, but fortunately, the route went, there was a trail down there, and where I was bushwhacking, it wasn't too bad. And, but I was getting this stupid, annoying tendon on my foot was bothering me. And it was like, sometimes, you have tendon injuries that you'll get through. And other times you have tendon injuries that you're worried that they're going to finish you off, and this was making me worried, like I was going to get finished off. And anyway, meanwhile, they were hiking in from Mullis Pass to meet me at this specified location on the Colorado Trail where they could give me support, meet me, I could sleep for a while. And then from there, we would go on with the rest of the route, which is all the more difficult stuff, but stuff that we've actually done twice before. Yeah, these great peaks like Vestal, Jagged, and so on.
Pigeon Turret, and we wake up into a call, me and Dave, or a satellite message at like 1 a.m. and he's hurting, his tendons really bothering him, and so for a second I was like, it's 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm tired, and so he's like, come get me, I'm like 2 miles away, and I think he was like 2.5 miles away, and then he was like, hello, are you there? And I'm like,
company, I was
yeah, he was like, come get me and come carry my pack, so I was like, Dave, do you want to go? But I knew I was going to go, but for a second I just needed to mentally prepare myself to get out of my sleeping bag.
Oh, yeah.
So we ended up hiking just out to meet him, and which was good. He was hurting that tendon, man, really. And then later we realized, like during this whole adventure that he did, that he needed that support, that sole support on the bottom of his shoe, because it was when his foot was bending when he was hiking. So we ended up switching out in his approach shoes, but his feet are kind of narrow, and so for a good portion of it he hiked with one approach shoe and one hiking shoe.
Or my feet are wide, and so the approach shoes are hard to wear for a long time. I don't like to wear them for too long, but so I ended up wearing them for the rest of the Wemmenooch wipeout. And so that was, but it was way better than the pain of the tendon.
Yeah. So in the morning we were like, just wear your approach shoe, see how that does. But it does. He kind of suffers a little bit because of the width of his feet. But anyway.
But so then we continued over this Wham Ridge, which, like I mentioned, man, if anyone's listening and they want to go see an amazing mountain, like go look at pictures of the Wham Ridge.
I jotted it down. I already can't wait.
Oh yeah, and man, it's amazing up there, just because that is where you see these mountain goats. Like I didn't see too many. I saw lots of elk on this thing and lots of like and saw some moose and stuff like that. I really didn't see that many mountain goats. It was crazy. But I saw a family of 3 of them, and they're living like near the top of the Wham Ridge where it's it's probably like 60 degrees, you know, so, but it feels vertical when you're on thing. And they're just running along, you know, up there like it's no big deal. I mean, so that's where they're really in their element, you know, it really is mind blowing. And so anyway, I did that route, and then I met up with these guys. Andrea and Dave, they were waiting, and then we did one of our bonus peaks, Trinity, which is
he was hurting.
Yeah, I was hurting, but man, and that one is no joke. I'll tell you, that was
tedious.
You know,
it's tedious.
Tedious is a word I use for something that's not necessarily because it's super technical, but it's just continuous slow terrain. You know, stuff like that. And so, and that one, yeah, you know, I was kind of fried, and that was when we're sort of in our heads, we were doing the math, and you know, so Jagged was the next peak we had to get to, but it's a couple of passes away, right? You know, okay. And so it's like one of the things that makes it difficult is that for most people doing it by itself, it requires a multi-day approach just to get to it. And so I was kind of afraid of Jagged because I didn't know. So last year we went to Jagged sort of with the kids, and we were kind of scouting it out. And what we had discovered was that the route has changed in recent years versus what the guidebook said. The guidebook,
or what we had experienced from a couple of years before.
Yeah, we had done it in 2016, and you know, we did the 3 cruxes that Roach talks about, and no problem. But with the kids, we did the 3 cruxes. We get up near the summit. We can't figure out how to get to the top, and we didn't really know what had changed. And so anyway, it was really kind of stressful then with the kids, you know, figuring out. Andrea finally finds this way up and drops the rope to me. And then with the rope, we could get the kids up there. Right. But so now that's what I was remembering. And I was like, crap, what if I can't figure out how to get up? Or what if I can't get up where Andrea got up? What am I going to do? And actually in research, we found that there is this little chimney feature that you go up. And in 2018, it must've been like a big boulder fell and basically plugged it. And so now to get up that chimney, you'd have to be like an expert. It makes it
hard.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, like we're I would say we're good. We're good scramblers. We're good climbers up until like, you know, low 5th class, like 5-4, we can handle. But I mean, so to come up on Jagged and to see this and actually be like, I don't know how to get up that's kind of rare for us on something like this. And so it was, you know, and so Andrew.
So I was hoping Andrea would be able to hike out there with me, just so, you know, she could help me make sure I was in the right spot or whatever, just for company out there. Cause I was scared, you know, and, but then we're on Trinity, and I'm kind of doing the math in my head because, you know, here I was expecting her to come out there, but now I'm doing the math, and it's like, I'm going to be at like, you know, Jagged as it's getting dark
at like 7
p.m.
And he's not even going to get down till 9.
Then they'd have to turn around and
hike over 2 mountain passes and all the way out.
Whoa. And it just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. And so it was just not, I was like, we can't do that, but I can come down to Balsam Lake with you.
Yeah. Balsam Lake's just sort of like this low point along the way towards Jagged. Like it's a beautiful lake, but there's just too many bugs over there, you know? So, but anyway, so they came with me down to Balsam Lake, and then they turned back, and it's a good thing because they still got back.
We got back at 11 p.m. And so, you know, to have to turn around and do that hike the next day was just, you know, it was glad. I was glad. I mean, it's a long day. We started hiking the day before, you know, to get in. So it was just a lot. And we had the big heavy packs. And so in addition to that, it's just a lot. But anyway, so
I continued on, and now I've got a heavy pack, right? Because now I've got a pad, a sleeping bag, a rope, because I wanted a rope on Jagged. So I've got a big heavy pack. And so I go on, it rains for like an hour. So I hunker down, you know, and then so when I finally get to the base of Jagged, the rocks have dried off, but everything else is just soaking wet, you know. The good news was after, you know, and Jagged always scares me. I think that's the 3rd or 4th time I've done it now, and 4th time. And it like, I don't know, there's something about Jagged. I think, especially with the way it changed, for me, it's the hardest one. Like technically the hardest to get to. Okay. It stands alone in my book. The next would be like, say, Dallas, because Dallas is very technically like tedious to get to the summit as well. But Jagged is like the hardest. And thank goodness when I got to the spot where Andrea made it up the previous year, there were 2 handholds there that were like the best handholds on the whole mountain.
Yeah.
You know, and they made me feel super secure right there. So I was able to make it up. And then got to the summit. I have probably, it's a rare picture, is a sunset from Jagged Summit. You know, that's probably rare because generally you wouldn't want to be on Jagged if the sun was setting.
Right.
You know, but so that was really pretty. And so then I headed out, and like, as I mentioned, it rained on me then, you know, the next day it was raining. And so I was eating through my food, you know, and so I noticed, you know, it's noon and I'm basically out of food the next day. And I still got to get over, you know, and that morning was like all these wet willows and this rugged sort of terrain where there's no trail and, you know, vertical bushwhacking through willows. And I get to this pass called Ruby Pass. And that's when I realized I'm low on food. So I did, you know, I kind of rationed a little bit of powder and like a little waffle thing. But now I got to go over Pigeon and Turret, and then I got to try out a new route over North Elis.
And he's
go over to Elis, got to go over to do Sunlight, Wyndham, and Jupiter, all with like 150 calories left, you know?
And to add on to that, he's never, like, we've stood on Eolis and North Eolis looking over at Pigeon and Turret, thinking, okay, so how would we scout that out? How would the route go? And we never got a chance to get out there again.
Just because it's so remote, you know, you just don't have time to do all these multi-day
When do
trips.
we have time to go out to, you know, the San Juans day after day, you know, week after week to do all this scouting? You just can't. And so we were crossing our fingers and praying that there was a route. And actually, he ended up finding a great route, and it actually allowed him to, it gained him some time.
It's a beautiful way to connect Pigeon and Turret. It's like, I remember as a kid going with my stepdad, and he left me and my little brother there in Chicago Basin for us to climb those peaks. Well, he hiked over, spending nights, you know, over at Ruby area, and then climbed those and then met us back. And so just be able to crank him out like that, it was really cool, you know, that route works.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, I'm hungry, you know, and you know, it's kind of funny because I've been a vegetarian for a long time, and I was so hungry I was starting to think about eating moths.
You ever see like Naked and Afraid?
Yeah, and I was like, wasn't really thinking about eating a cute little pika, but I did look at that pika, and I was like, you know, that's food.
That's calories. It's protein.
That's how hungry I was getting. I mean, you know, and there was a ton of moths. They're super annoying. Whenever I'd have my light on, they'd be bouncing off your face and stuff, you know.
That's the worst.
But so anyway, I'm getting pretty desperate for food. But now I'm like in 14er land, and that's like so different than being out in these centennials that are so remote. And you're always bushwhacking. You see a cairn the size of a mountain, you know. It's like, wow, okay, here we are, you know, back at the circus. When and the Chicago Basin, they're not even that busy as far as 14ers are concerned. But so then it gets dark on me, and I got to do this traverse over to Jupiter, and that ended up being super treacherous. And at this point, I'm pretty desperate because I really want to sleep, but I'm really hungry too. I really want food. And meanwhile, Andrea knows I'm hungry because, you know, we're texting.
Yeah, so he doesn't plan on getting off of Jupiter until late. And so so I know he's hungry. So I go, and Laura and I go to some Mexican place and get a burrito, and it's a big burrito, and I'm super proud of it. And so I'm like, great, he's gonna love this.
There was a
you know,
cookie there too, or something.
Cookie,
right?
Nice.
brought him, you know, some food, and then also just like some sleeping stuff. And so it was I wasn't gonna hike in until probably closer to midnight, or like 11 was the plan, I think, for me to hike in. But it was like 8 p.m. and I'm sitting, you know, at Purgatory, and I'm just like laying there with my eyes open. I'm like, this is stupid. I'm just gonna go hike in while I have some light. It's 8 p.m. So I started hiking in at 8 p.m. And meanwhile, I'm in communication with Andrew, and you know, we know I'm gonna be a little bit early. So so I start the hike in, and I just wanted to, I haven't been out there in a little while, so it was just nice to be out there in a little bit of light for an hour, you know, so or like a half hour. And so I'm hiking along, and Andrew mentions like all the moths and stuff. I was just kind of in a really grumpy mood because when it turns dark, I'm like going through spider webs, and I'm hot and sticky, and there's these moths flying in my face, and I'm kind of like just all the trails kind of overgrown in places. And
she has screamed like blood curdling cries before over a moth. Like, you know, like, so yeah.
Oh my God, there's that one story where there was like a moth in my shirt, and I unzipped my shirt, and they're like flew out of my shirt, and I'm like, oh my God, it's so gross.
So yeah, poor Andrea when she's alone out there.
I just hate the bugs. I'm just not a bug person. I'm sorry, I do not love them. And so I'm like hiking in, and I'm like, this sucks, you know? So I like have my music playing on my phone and I'm just trying to like forget about it. And so then I get to the 10-mile bridge, which is where originally that was where I was going to meet him. And I was like, oh, that's not so bad, you know, like 10 miles in, that'll be great. And while I was hiking, I ended up getting this message that he wanted me to meet him at 10:08 in the basin. And so
it's like another 5 miles up the trail past that bridge.
5 miles. So it'll be a 15-mile hike in. And so I got to the 10-mile bridge knowing that I was going to continue on. And I was like, well, this is nice. I'll just kind of like nap here for a little bit because I was going to be early. And so I just kind of laid down and it was nice. I didn't actually have anything warm. So we call it shiver sleeps. And so I just kind of laid down and shut my eyes. And then, you know, when you start shivering and can't take it anymore, then you keep going. So I'd wake up and then I got going again, and probably 2 miles in, I was just tired and I couldn't keep my eyes open. And sometimes for me that happens, like when the dark hits, I just get really tired. And so I just plopped myself down right in the middle of the trail and I just took a little nap again. But I think I fell asleep a little harder. It was kind of comfy. And when I woke up, I didn't even think about what I was doing. I just started walking again and started hiking. And I realized that I was hiking in the wrong direction, probably about 2 miles later.
Oh no.
And so I was about back to the bridge. And when I look at, and when I'm like, I was like, Andrew, and I look at my elevation and I'm at like 8,500. I'm like, he wants me up at 10.8. That's another, like, well, I don't know, over 2,000 feet. I'm like, holy crap. This is because it's just demoralizing. You know, I'm like, I just hiked 2 miles, never mind the river being on the wrong side of me. Never mind me hiking downhill. I didn't realize none of that clicked, you know? And so I'm like, holy crap. So I texted Andrew and I was like, I just hiked in the wrong direction, like 1.5 miles, 2 miles. I'm like, I can't come to 10.8 and come get you. And then he's like, and then what did he say? He was like, he was like, I'm so demoralized now and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I really need you and all this stuff. And I was like, oh crap. So, you know, of course I'm going to come. So then I'm just like, okay, I was like, I'll just start hiking, you know, and his thing was he was just going to start hiking to me as well. And we were like, well, we'll just end up meeting each other. He wasn't off of Jupiter yet, I don't think. And so I was just like, I was feeling very unmotivated. I was just like, man, I can't believe I did that. I have so much more to go. And so it ended up being fine. And
she makes it sound like I'm this baby, you know, but I would like to point out that I had been going about 12 hours and 7 mountains without any calories.
Oh my God.
When I think about that, I'm like, shoot, I'm like, God, he's been out there for the last like, dude, I can do this.
Right.
An extra 4 miles and 2,000 feet.
The only thought that was keeping me going was she's going to be there at 10.8. So I got to keep pushing. I desperately just wanted to lay down and sleep, but I needed the food. I needed to get to her. And that's all I could think about. And so then I get this text like, well, I turned around. So just come down here to the bridge. You know, it's fine. But I was like, that's 5 more miles.
Like, no.
So I begged her and pleaded to come back
actually
up.
During that, and they're not, someone took cut the trees now, but it was really pain because when you get closer to the basin, you're going through all of this tree fall, you know, all these fallen trees that are across the trail and you're hopping over these trees and it's really annoying, but actually it was amazing. There were a couple miracles on this trip. And one of them was right where Andrew had met me, maybe, I don't know, 50 feet back.
Yeah, I was kind of lost in these trees. It was kind of like I was mentioning over by Rio Grande Pyramid, all the dead trees and what's it going to be like when they all fall down. That's kind of started in Chicago Basin. This year they had like over 300 down trees across the trail. And I was hoping by the time we got there, they'd be cleaned up. And you could tell some done, but there was one section in there when I was getting close to meeting her where I lost the trail and I pick up my phone to try to make sure I'm right. And according to my phone, I'm right on the trail. So I didn't know, do I go left? Do I go right? So I was just kind of standing there in this like mental daze, not knowing, like to the left, it looked like it was going to go way down steep and to the right climb. I didn't know where to go. So it was kind of hard to get through there. But then right is like, I get out of this bushwhacking spot like I see Andrea's light ahead, and right there hanging on this tree, there's this giant like deluxe sleeping pad that someone must have lost off their path.
No way.
Right.
Wow.
So I grabbed this big old pad.
It's a huge pad.
Yeah.
So we both ended up sleeping on it,
Wow.
with the sleeping bag, and it was great. We got great sleep, for a couple hours, and then he ate his food. Another thing, right, like probably 2 seconds, not being exaggerating, 2 seconds after we met,
my tracker died.
His tracker died.
Yeah, I knew it was getting close. I forgot about that. Yeah, my tracker was getting super close to dying on this long Wemmenooch wipeout.
Yeah, so it was cool. I was able to, and we were talking along the way, so it was nice that it didn't die, because when we're getting closer, I'm like, Andrew, where are you? So it was good that
right when we met, she was like, how's your tracker? And I go to check it on,
and it's dead.
Oh wow.
Right when we met.
So then the next day, or not the next day, like 2 hours later, we waited till light, and so got a little bit of sleep, and then hiked the rest of the way out. So
but that number still blows my mind how Andrea basically hiked in like 28 miles to bring me a burrito. I mean, that's got to be some sort of like support crew record.
It's got to be. Yes.
And so that was another big hike. Some other big ones were just like hiking up his bike. And we have a couple stories for that we can get into later, but
well, strategically, on this thing with the use of the 3,000 foot rule, you can still use bikes, as long as you're below the 3,000 foot rule area.
Okay.
So, in the 14er record, there were 4 spots where I used it. And I had a really heavy downhill bike that I was using that time. And it was great, except for the person that had to put it in position.
It's heavy.
They had to push like this 40-pound bike up there. But then I would just be loving it, downhill bike on that stuff. But this year, before we get going, I mean, that thing's been hanging for like 6 years. And the brakes were completely had lost all their liquid, their fluid. And we tried figuring out how to refill them, but we couldn't. And so at the last minute, we take my cross country bike, and it's fine. I used to race mountain bikes a little bit. And so, I mean, I'm comfortable biking, but so, I'm always trying to think of places where, where could they take the bike and just make my descent a little easier or something, or speed us up a little bit.
So gosh, and sometimes where we hiked the bike up, it was great, and then other times it was a total disaster, which led to his demise. But yeah, and then on top of that were the 21 peaks that I ended up hiking with him, and like I said, they were by my choice. I was, it was if the crew plan allowed for me to do it, then I would just do it. I love to be out there. I love to be out there with him. It's how we connect. It's how we reconnect. And and from him being gone from me for, this, that, and the other, how many mountains, it was just good to be out there with him. And I always like to tell the story of us on Vermilion. That was a pretty crazy, hike that I'm super glad that I was with him on personally, because I think that it was also one where it was good for him to have me.
Yeah, Vermilion's like sort of this like standalone peak. It's kind of, you do it by itself here. It's not linked up with any other thing on this particular record. And I had just done kind of a big day. I'd done this great route, from Sneffels or Tea Kettle and Sneffels cross country over to Dallas, which I had mentioned before as being one of the harder ones, technically. So I had to carry a rope on that whole traverse too. And I got out, and that's kind of depressing. On the Dallas one, I realized I missed what would have been a great mountain bike ride down. If I'd known, I could have had them push up a bike there. Would have saved me some painful miles there. But so anyway, but we still got out, and we still had enough light to like maybe get up high on Vermilion before dark. And so this was great. You sort of knock off a peak, maybe done by midnight, and then you can plan on like 4 hours of sleep during the night. That's kind of like, that's the ideal golden plan right there. You want to finish, a couple hours in the dark, get your sleep during the night, and then you can be hiking in those beautiful morning hours, instead of what usually happened to me, which is like spend the whole night out there, get out at like 6 a.m, and then have to sleep during those beautiful morning hours, So anyway, Vermilion, I hadn't hiked that since I was a kid, and Andrea came with me, and fortunately we were making good time because it's kind of just like short and sweet, this route we were doing on it. And but I had no recollection of it. I didn't really pay attention to the instructions in the guidebook on it. I just like sort of like, I know where it is. I figured we'd just figure it out, you know? And anyway, when we got up there, it was just getting dark and we just got to look at where we were going to go. It's a steep gully. And man, that has got to be one of the loosest peaks on the earth. I mean, like just the whole thing is just this pile of small rocks, you know. How is it standing?
It's super loose. And going across the steep, the really steep gullies with the really loose rock can be kind of super intimidating. And now it's dark.
Yeah, but I will say it's almost so loose that it's like it's a little better than ones where you step on a boulder and several boulders go away. Right. It's just like you sort of get used to just everything falling. You know,
really.
To that,
yeah. And so something about us is like, when we're together in the mountains, there's a lot of balancing each other out. So one person has a low and the other one, you know, kind of switches into a mode where, okay, well, I'm going to not be in a low, you know, just to balance each other out, to encourage the other person and everything like that. So that's kind of how we operate, and kind of in general in life too. You know, if one person's down, the other, we're never really both down at the same time.
Nice.
When we met, Andrea had only climbed 4 peaks, you know, and so what I found over years and years and years of doing mountains with her, she never really liked loose gullies. You know, that was always something she wasn't happy in. And so we get into this loose gully here, and I'm super kind of nervous just because it's so loose. It's dark now, and at the top of the gully there is like literally a vertical patch of snow. And I'm like, well, crap, what are we going to do? Like,
and we're like looking down the mountain. We're like looking way down the ridge. And Andrew's like, I didn't want this to turn into an all night thing because we started route planning. Otherwise we were like, we didn't know exactly what our route was going to be at the time. And so we were just kind of constructing and thinking about all different routes. And we're like, well, if we take that, we're going to be out all night. That was not our plan for Vermilion.
We were looking at that thing, you know, thinking we're not going to be able to go up this snow gully. So we're like looking at alternate routes.
Right.
You know? And like in the dark, you can see this ridge kind of going off. And I had remembered as a kid, I had done Vermilion and gone down to this other peak kind of on this ridge called Fuller. So I knew it must have gone, you know, so if we could have like dropped back down the gully and gone way around there. But now I'm thinking hours this is going to take.
And so he's getting super stressed out. And I'm like, you know what? It's fine. And so I was like, whatever happens, you know, we're going to figure it out. So then we're climbing.
But I got to tell the story because like, so like it's so loose, right? And so now I'm sort of scouting. I'm like, hey, let's go over here and scout around this corner and see if that goes. And so we go over this really treacherous stuff. I mean, it's just like super. And so I'm kind of freaking out because I feel responsible for Andrea being there and stuff. And she's just like, you know, having a great time. And at one point, I'm like, Andrea, don't you realize how serious this is? Because I'm used to her being nervous.
And so, because I'm sitting here, and like, we're going across these gullies or going up this vertical snow, and I'm like, it's okay. Like, it's going to be fine. Yep, I see that. We're going to be fine. And we're just going to cross that. And he's like, you're not taking this seriously enough.
I wanted her to be like, more like,
I'm like,
you know, I don't know. I just wasn't comfortable with her being
so
like.
He wasn't comfortable with me being comfortable.
Right.
But we did find a way up this, like we were able to wedge ourselves in the crack of this thing. Like it'd be like one hand on the rock and then, you know, one hand punching a hole in the snow or a foot kicking into it. It was kind of hard at that point because it's dark, you know, the hard snow, but we were able to sort of wedge our way up that snow patch after everything else was just dead ending, you know, in cliffs or something. So, and it's funny, I've got this really funny picture of her, like right as she's at the top of the snowfield, you know, and she's just got like the biggest smile, jazz hands, you know, everything, you know, it's just so, I'm like, it's just so funny.
It's like you're way too happy in that picture.
The right emotion for that spot, you know. But so that was kind of fun. Yeah. It was good, like on that one. Yeah.
Cool. So kind of, and you know, we haven't even talked about all of his low points, but you know, being with him on Pikes Peak was kind of him coming out of rock bottom.
Oh yeah, we have to tell that story. Like I don't know how much time you have.
I know how much time.
Hey, I want to hear it. I want to hear it.
You know, but yeah, like so. I mean, man.
So this so this kind of.
Well, let me set the theme. Here.
We can tie it into. Stop talking, Andrew. We can tie this into you know how kind of. And what I did for support hiking up his bike. And so that's how it all started, was me hiking his bike up to up the South Colony Lakes Road. And so from there is when you can finish the story.
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to sort of talk about like, you know, too, it was like, you know, I sort of alluded to the fact that I was having some of these rough nights, you know, like I said, the plan was always to try to hike, you know, in the day, right? And not in the night. That's the plan. Or when you're in, like, hike something easy, right? And but I just, you know, because my pace was slower than I wanted all along, and just the plan was sort of off whack, you know, I just always ended up like having these disastrous nights out there where I was spending the whole night out there. So
like on Half Peak.
yeah, Half Peak is you know, that was a brutal one just because it was like an unexpected complete night of bushwhacking.
Something
like,
he hadn't scouted. You know, one of the very few that hasn't been scouted that didn't quite go his way when he was out there.
You wouldn't believe how many willows are on that mountain. You wouldn't believe it. Just goes on and on and on and on and on. And it's like, and they were wet from rain, you know, and so they're wet willows. And then a lot of times it's like running mud streams that you're walking through to get through the willows. And then I got above tree line and there's still willows, you know, and then later, I went and reread Roach's description of it, and he calls it an adventurous route up up Half Peak, and I just hadn't paid enough attention to that one word.
Right.
You know? Like, dang you, Roach.
Yeah. So it was a brutal night. It's funny, I was listening to this audiobook, and I'll never, I mean, to be able to forget like the mountain, I associate it with this Unbroken book. It was about this guy, you know, World War II. He was plane crashed, and they were in the raft. He got captured by the Japanese. So I spent the whole night listening to that story as I'm bushwhacking and stuff like that, you know. And but I was, so I'm having these brutal nights, you know. There was more that were to come and stuff like that. But anyway, so we survived the San Juans, you know, You know, that Half Peak, actually Half Peak happened right before the Women's Wipeout, right? And because Half Peak took me all night, we had to leave some easy ones in the area to come back and clean up later, you know. So we cleaned them up on the way out of there. So it's nice to get the San Juans behind you. There's like 30 Centennials in that range. You know? So surviving
that brutal night on Capitol. You know, he had a couple really brutal lows.
So yeah, I guess I hadn't mentioned that, but like on the Centennial traverse, I got through all these difficult traverses okay, and it turned night on me on Capitol, which I've done, you know, 20 times at least. And then I just couldn't follow the standard route. I just could not follow the cairns. Like, I'm like, who's knocking cairns down on Capitol or something? I just couldn't follow the route. So I spent extra hours up there on Capitol. Like, it was insane, you know? And, but so anyway, we survived the San Juans. And so now finally we got to go tackle what are basically the last hard peaks left. Like, hard isn't technical, you know, class 4 peaks, stuff like that. We've got the Sangres, you know, the Sangre de Cristo range is left, right? But that's basically 2 days. You know, you do them in 2 chunks. There's a bunch of them that I call the Crestone group, but there's only 2 that are actually like named Crestone. But you know, it's like, you know, Kit Carson, Challenger, Humboldt. Plus, there's some Centennials there, and then there's another group which is sort of centered around Blanca Peak, and it includes like Little Bear, and you know, and so anyway, each of these days are kind of critical in the sense that you want to do them when they're dry, you know, because if it's raining or storms, you can be in some pretty nasty spots. And so a couple critical days. And you know, so we get to the first one, and I think, was that when Laura was leaving, or like Laura was, I had my last big meal. You know, we didn't sort of mention support crew, but my sister had sort of been with us for a while now. And she was cooking all this great food, and I was eating so much when she was there. You know, she was like these giant pots. Like,
we called her Forerunner, the food runner, because with Laura and Dave being there, their main job was food. So I didn't have to worry about it. I didn't have to worry about feeding him, and it was the best. I didn't have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and cook his meal, you know. And
so, I'm really craving the food she's cooking.
It's like great, like egg croissant sandwiches and potato burritos, and you know, with like so much stuff. She did a great job, you know, cooking the food, which was awesome.
And so she had stayed with us through that point, and then, you know, so she left and said goodbye. So, and off I go. Tomer says, great couple days, you know, to be in the, you know, well, I had 2 days to be in the Sangres, right? 2 dry days. And so he wanted us, he highly recommended we get them done as soon as we could, you know, so we headed over there. And, you know, and so it was a pretty good day, you know, but after, you know, the big Women's Wipeout and stuff, I was still, you know, I wasn't feeling great. But actually, you know, and I haven't mentioned this to Andrea, the night before, so after finishing the Women's Wipeout, we had to drive over Cinnamon Pass. We still had 4 peaks to wipe out. We had Red Cloud, Sunshine, and then 2 unnamed Centennials. And I actually had an amazing day on those. Like,
because he left us to do those in, like, it was hot. it was like the middle of the day. It was just, he left kind of miserable, and just watching him hike away was really sad because he was just really sad. So it was kind of like, wah, 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 you know?
But in the evening, I was actually jogging up to the summits of these like unnamed centennials. Like I was running, not running fast, you know, but
I knew he had a good day, but I didn't know that he was jogging.
So I was feeling like I was feeling like I was going to get strong from that point out. Like the first half of this, I mean, basically I'm about halfway done now. And I was feeling like, okay, wow, this is great. Like, look at, you know, I look at my legs are strong. Everything's going to be great now, you know? And so, you know, I got out of there. So then we headed over to the, you know, the Song Grace, like I mentioned. And so, and that day I wasn't hiking as super fast, but I was having a pretty good day. You know, I went and did Adams and then Kit Carson, Challenger, Columbia Point, you know, just knocking them off. And you know, it was actually kind of cool. I kept running into this one girl and it was like, you know, she saw me, said hi. Then I go to Adams, come down, there she is again on Kit Carson. Really? So we talk again, you know, and she was always sort of right there, you know. And but anyway, so then go get the hardest peaks that you want to get done on this day are Crestone Peak and Crestone Needle. There's a traverse in between them. So all that just went great according to plan. You know, great weather, got through all those. Still got a couple hours to get Humboldt done in the light, you know. And so what I did was, you know, you have to drop off of the Needle, and you know, you drop down to spot called South Colony Lakes is what they're called, and then from there I got to, you know, climb 2,000 feet up Humboldt basically, and then I can drop back down and then get to where Andrea left my bike for me. And this is a spot where I'll have a 5-mile bike ride down. And when I did this same bike ride in the 14er record on my downhill bike, it really lifted my spirits because it was just, you're so fast. Like you'll blow by like any cars driving it or whatever. You just blow right past them. And it's, you know, you got the wind in your hair and it's just, you're not beating your joints up. And it's, so I was really looking forward to this bike ride, you know, remembering that. And so Andrea, meanwhile,
so I'm hiking up his bike, and I noticed just like some wet patches, and I'm sure it's always wet in this area, and you know me, I'm just trying to look out after him, and I call him because I have service, or he called me or something. And
from the summit of Humboldt,
the summit of Humboldt, and the sun's going down, and so we're talking a little bit. I'm like, oh, I just left your bike, blah blah blah, and I'm just and it's funny, we talk about this story a lot because I'm like, well, you know, there's a couple wet spots that you need to be really careful of, and they're just kind of long. And he just like interrupts me. He's like, yeah, I get it. Yeah, I know. The sun's going down. I have to go. And so like I kind of hung up the phone, and I was like, that was rude. I was like a little rude, but
I knew she was annoyed with me, and I felt bad. I did, and I had been a little like short with her, I guess, because you know I had ditched my pack, you know, 2,000 feet below, just so I could hike up. That's something I do a lot, is I'll try to ditch my pack and then hike up, and I was kind of racing it because even though Humboldt's probably the easiest of the bunch, I still like it. When I did these in winter, I noticed coming down Humboldt in the dark, it was tricky for me. For some reason, I kept getting sucked off the wrong way off the ridge, you know? And so I just wanted to get as far down as I could in the light. And so I call her from the summit, and she's like, oh, and by the way, you know, I'm like, okay, you know, I'm heading down below, and I want to get going. I got 20 minutes of light left.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah, and she's like, oh, you know, and the trail, you know, it's a little bit wet, and then there's this other spot, you know, I was like, yeah, I got it. It's always wet. I'm out of here. Bye. You know. But then I felt kind of bad. I was like, oh, she thought I was being rude, and so I felt bad. And you know, anyway, so I get going down, and you know, it had been a beautiful day. And one of those days with a beautiful sunset, because it was all smoky. I forgot to mention, you know, the weather had kind of cleared and the smoke rolled in. You know, we've been dealing with smoke all freaking summer, ever since the rain sort of cleared up. But it does make for some beautiful sunsets. Yeah. And I really remember like what a glowing, you know, red ball the sun was there before it set, you know. But
it sets into nothing.
Yeah. It looks like you'll see the sun, and it looks like the horizon is way below it, and then all of a sudden you'll just see it sort of set into thin air. Yeah. So I don't know what that's going on. Maybe the clouds or the smoke is hiding the true horizon or something. I'm not.
It's like an illusion.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also, it does the same thing when it rises. It's just sort of like you can see some mountains and you're expecting it to come over them, but it pops up higher, you know, just out of the smoke. And but anyway, as I'm coming down, you know, I had noticed right as I was talking to Andrea, some weird clouds starting to form over you know, some of the peaks, you know. And as I'm going down, and it was pretty slow, but and it was the same thing I remember before. That trail always tries to suck me off to the sides, when it's getting dark and I'm tired. But so I make it down, and as I'm getting down, to the saddle there, and I still have quite a ways to go, there's a lightning bolt, and it lights up the whole sky. And Andrea remembered this.
And I know that lightning bolt because I was down at the very bottom in my car, and I was just like, oh, I'm just gonna lay down, and even though I still had some cell service, later we'll tell you I didn't get his call, but so I fell asleep, and I think I'm like laying on my phone, but it's just the sky, I hear this thunder. And so I wake up, and then I'm sitting up in my car, and it's just this huge lightning bolt. It was so impressive. And I was like, wow, thank God Andrew is not up there, because like up at the summits, it was so impressive. And it was just immediate thunder. And it was just it's just ingrained in my brain, just that lightning bolt right over the peaks, and just the sound of the thunder that was, the first, boom of thunder is what woke me up, and then there was this other flash of lightning, and I was just like, holy crap. Wow. And so then that's
it was one of those really, really cool ones too, where it like lights up everything, right?
It was like day. It was like daytime for a split second. It was incredible. And I wasn't
expecting any sort of weather, but now we got a lightning bolt, and going a little further, lightning bolt and a raindrop. And so I start clicking my pace. I want to get to my pack, Yeah. So now third lightning bolt starting to hail now. Yeah. And the fourth one, it's like this full on hailstorm with like, small marble size hail. And I'm sprinting, trying to get down my pack.
Yeah, forget the wet road. I was trying to tell him.
Yeah.
Now the whole thing,
it's all wet,
like an inch of hail.
And so I dove under this tree. I didn't quite make it to my pack, but it really wasn't providing me much cover, So I stayed there for a minute, and then finally I go for the pack. Now I'm soaked and kind of demoralized, And there's a lot of willows on that trail going down to that where the bike was going to be, and so that sucked, because then I had to get, I guess I'm already wet, so who cares? But it's like, it just sucks getting more wet, you're soaked, and you're just adding more water, and you can't even see the trails, just covered in hail balls,
Right.
And so anyway, I wasn't super thrilled, but then I get to the bike, and I'm like, okay, well, great, I can be on the bike. Unfortunately, it was all wet now, and that road, the actual trailhead used to come up all the way up to where my bike was, but several years ago they closed the road like halfway up. So now you could drive up 2.5 miles, but the last 2.5 you have to hike now. Okay. And that road hasn't been maintained in over a decade, and so all this water, rainstorms, snow melt, it's slowly taking away all the dirt, and so it's just getting rougher and rougher over the years. So it's kind of rough. It would have been great to have my downhill bike, but so I'm getting beat up going down here, and I was doing okay, but then at some point, just out of the blue, I'm like staring at my face is about to hit the ground, and it was like one of those surreal moments where time stops, and I like have a moment to think about the fact that my face is about to smash into the ground. And I didn't have a helmet or anything, because I just wanted to have my light on. I had my headlamp on. Also had a light on my bike, but and so I actually had time to put my hands down, and so I didn't really get any scratches or anything, but it was kind of a hard go over handlebars crash, and there was this, like, I swear it felt like this like several second delay, and then I hear my bike bam 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 bam, it crash, and it sort of crashes over to the side, and I just sort of lay there. I was really exhausted at this point, and it felt so good just to lay down. It felt warm for some reason. Yeah, so I just sort of lay down. I wish, sometimes it'd be really cool just to take the phone out and take a selfie of yourself in those moments.
Yeah, right.
I wish I could see myself just laying there all comfy. But then it was like, I realized I'm in kind of running water, because of the snow melts, or sorry, the hail was sort of melting, and so I got up and. But
he's so lucky that he didn't break his face.
It could have been worse.
Or his collarbone. I mean, that could have been the end of the road
for sure. It was such a bumpy road, and where I went over my handlebars, I didn't even really see any big rocks. Like, I don't know. It was almost as if the mountain god had reached down and plucked up my rear wheel and like dumped me off.
That's enough.
Like shook me up. Yeah. And but so the bad news was I had damaged my calf muscle, and it was one of these things where I couldn't move that leg, or the calf muscle would just freak out and like seize up. It would seize up. So so anyway, it was kind of a disaster, you know, and it wasn't like I didn't have any blood or nothing. You know, you might expect normally to be skinned a little bit from a mountain bike crash like that, but no, it was. So I in hindsight, I really think the pedal of the bike, which was just one of those big flat pedals, must have whacked my calf really hard as I was crashing. And like, you know, imagine, you know, if someone hits you really hard in the flesh of a muscle, you know, it can make it really painful.
Yeah.
But I didn't know what was going on. It would just seize up. And so I couldn't even pedal. The act of pedaling, when that leg would bend, the muscle would seize up on me, you know, and I still had a ways to go. So I sent Andrea a text message. I even tried calling her.
Yeah, this is when, like, I think I'm laying on my phone, so I didn't hear it.
And I was like, oh, she's probably, you know.
And then he thinks I'm mad at him.
She's like ignoring me because she thought I was a jerk when I was talking to her before. That's what I'm thinking. And so anyway, it was a super painful ride. It wasn't the same experience I had before where I was like, it's this joyous bike ride to get down there. You know, I get down there and the car, she's sleeping. So I like bang on the door. Like,
yeah, so he bangs on the door and then falls to the ground. You know. Yeah, I'm like, oh crap. And honestly, like, I really, like, all joking aside, I really hate him coming back in a condition like that. You know, I always am hoping that he's going to be in high spirits. It really keeps my spirits high and hopeful. And so, but, you know, a lot of times, you know, he doesn't come back in high spirits and so it really, I'm like, oh crap, you know, what now? What is wrong now? Because also through this whole thing, I'm really like counting every single day as a success and knowing that any day we can be stopped for whatever reason. And so every day I have these high hopes. I'm just like, you know, counting our blessings that we made it another day, you know, and so every day I've had this little fear inside of me that something's going to happen and we're going to be forced to quit and just be forced to stop. And so when he comes down and he's like banging on the window and then he's like, you didn't pick up your phone. Oh my God. And he's, you know, really in a lot of pain. I'm like, holy crap, what is going on? So, you know, I just get him in the car. And actually, to go back a little bit, during the day, we were talking about getting a hotel this night. So I ended up getting a hotel for the night, and which we were super lucky about. And so throw him in the car and get him into the hotel room. And we had gotten a hotel previously for one night, and it really was a pick me up for Andrew. He really loves that, getting in the bathtub, getting a shower, getting, you know, just getting rejuvenated and sleeping on a bed, and just really, really was a huge plus and pick me up for him. So we figured that doing that one more time would be like, you know, kind of on, I guess this was now day 15, is just a good time to do it. You know, we've got like a little less than a week left. Let's get freshened up. And so got him to the hotel, and he just, you know, he's questioning if he can continue. He can barely walk. And so we get him to the bathtub, and, you know, we're just one thing at a time here. Let's just get clean. And so his calf is seizing up. And
I know it's kind of crazy to think about that now. It's like, man, I still had so many mountains to climb, like probably 30, 35 mountains to go. And my leg is like, you know, I mean, how am I going to hike on this leg like this, you know?
And we really were kind of like, at not that night, but the next morning, into pikes that we were climbing the next day, we kind of realized that it's very painful, but it's not a take me out pain. It was kind of more of like a dead leg. Like we kind of think he hit the pedal of his bike on his calf muscle, so it just really hurt, kind of like a dead leg. So he's in the bathtub, and you know, the bathtub is like full up to his neck with water. You know, he's just like in the fetal position, curled up, just like brown water and hot bathtub now, you know. And so we're like draining the water, and he's complaining that his calf is
well, and my thought was that it was like, maybe it's just intense cramping, you know, maybe that's what's going on, right? So I was like, so let's go for some pickle juice, because I'd heard that is really good for cramping, you know, electrolytes, right? And we were on this trip to Goblin Valley earlier this year, and my mom had kind of got overworked on this canyon hike we did, and she was cramping up, and she drank some pickle juice. And, you know, from what I had remembered, is like, man, she was like, wow, the pickle juice really works, you know? So we had brought some pickles just for this purpose, emergency pickles, you know. And but I didn't know that my mom was severely affected that night by puking and diarrhea, right? And so anyway, you know, we're in the shower, and so I was like, okay, let's eat some pickles and drink some pickle juice, you know. So Andrea brings it in, I drink some pickle juice. You know, I eat a pickle and then she stuffs another one in.
Yeah,
like, I was like, I'm good, I'm good. And she like stuffs that you know. And then I just got like, I was in the tub.
He was telling
me
that like,
hot and nauseous,
he was like telling me, he's like, I can't kick this nausea and blah blah blah. And so then like he's like, we drained the bathtub water, and then he puts the shower on him, and he's just like, I just can't kick the nausea. And I'm in the bathroom with him, and he just like at that very moment he's just vomiting his brains out like 3 times, and it was full vomits all 3 times. Like it was, there's no dry heaving, there was no just like getting the rest out of your stomach. It was like full on puke, and I was just like sitting there wide-eyed like, holy crap, what is happening? And so then like he's like, I told you I was nauseous. You know. And
well, she'd been talking about all this food I had to eat, you know, because that's one of her big jobs, is like making me eat like all the time,
shoving calories, and it's like, and it's not even really like, it's not even good. It's like, you know, donuts and cookies and cake, and you know, when we're off the mountain, that's when I try to cook him the warm food and the you know, the noodles and the potatoes and stuff like that. But so he's trying to like, now he's like puking and he's weak, and now I'm bathing him, and I kind of compare it to, you know, it's like taking care of an infant, you know. It's like totally, he's just incapable of anything right now. And so I'm bathing him and then trying to get him into bed. And we have these, we didn't even talk about them, we have these like compression zip ups, I don't know what they are, but
like compression boots.
For the whole leg.
For the whole legs.
Yeah, and they compress it and keep the blood flowing.
So I got him in bed and put him in those, and kind of that was just his job, and just fall asleep, you know. And so then I'm trying to like, his gear is soaked, everything is wet. So, you know, poor people, I don't know, it's like 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm going in and out trying to get to the car, and then, you know, this, that, and the other, trying to organize. And I'm like, I don't know, hopefully people can sleep, because I am just like going in and out and everywhere. But so he ends up falling asleep, and we actually don't wake up until later the next morning. It's like 8 a.m. We actually get a really good night's sleep. And
we stayed past checkout time, you know, we were there past 11. And because, you know, it was like, what are we gonna do today? You know, obviously I can't go do the Little Bear group, you know, on my calf like this, and now I'm super weak because of the puking. I didn't want to eat anything because everything made me nauseous all of a sudden. You know, so we decided, well, you know, we had these 4 stragglers, like 3 of them in the saw watch that we left behind, you know, they were all by themselves, and we had pikes. And so I sort of had pictured in my head, well, that was going to be a day, you know, we'd go pick up the stragglers plus pikes on one day. So now it was like, well, let's change the plan. Let's just go get pikes and just see how it goes. Cause it's a pretty smooth, it's a long hike, you know, but it's got a pretty good trail, and it might be a good one to test the calf out on, you know. So we drive over to Pikes, and that ended up for me just feeling like this marathon death march hike. Andrea's like, oh yeah, but you know, it was fine. And you know, we knew that you could go on after that. Like, man, no, for me, no. I was like,
mentally he was somewhere else, but me, I knew he could go on. So I'm like, you're fine. It's going to be great.
I mean, you know, she's making this amazing collection of all the places I've slept in the mountains. You know, she got a couple good ones for her collection there.
Yeah.
You know,
and it's really funny because, you know, we took Craig's and you know, on the route, you're in this huge flat area, and you see the summit of Pikes all the way in the back. And so I have the picture of him napping, and with an arrow pointing to the summit. I'm like, almost there. So long. It is long.
I mean, Pikes, you know, it's got a reputation of being really easy from that Craig's trailhead side, you know. But man, it is a long hike, you know. It's still like,
I mean, it's long when you do the whole thing in a load, you know. It just takes forever. So that was another one where I was like, oh, you know, I can carry your pack and help you out.
But the good news was, like, after it was a real struggle going up with the calf, you know. But it was like one of those injuries. I don't know. I used to get, when I was younger, you know, playing basketball, if you'd ever roll your ankle really hard, a lot of times if you just walked it off, it would be fine. But if you didn't, if you just went home, then it would swell up and you'd put you out for like a week. And I think this was one of those things where we did the right thing. You know, I got out there on it and I hiked on it. It was painful, but I worked it out, you know, and at that point it was still really sore for days going on, but it was manageable, you know, and so that was good news. But now I was feeling very frail. You know, like last year, my dad's always been really thin. And I remember a couple of years ago, we did this trip to the, you know, and I don't see him too often, and put my arms around him at one point for a hug. And he felt so frail to me because he's so skinny, you know, and man, I was feeling like that. I was feeling very frail. I was looking at myself. I was feeling very thin. I mean, I did lose, you know, quite a bit of weight. And this was probably at the low, and I didn't want to eat anything. So that was a big problem, you know, because, you know, obviously I need to keep the calories coming in. And at this point, I've probably used up my reserves. It'd probably be good to be kind of a heavier person than a lot of ultra runners. You know, you want to be these 130, 140 pound guys, you know, you're light, you know, and that pays dividends. But a lot of times when you're that light, you don't have a lot of reserves if you have to go into a cold night. You know, if you run out of food, you know, your body, you just don't have a lot of fat to eat. Well, I had used up those reserves that I have, being a slightly bigger guy. So I was worried, like, what am I going to do? Well, fortunately, she had a friend living in Colorado Springs. And when we're going through all this food, it just makes me want to puke just thinking about it. Things normally my go-to food, like Oreos. Normally I, you know, go to the golden Oreos, love those. Oh man, one thought of an Oreo, I just wanted to puke all over, you know, just like, you know, so, but I was thinking, well, maybe yogurt would be okay, you know, and Andrea, you know, there's these Noosa yogurts that are super high in calories. And I was thinking of it, like, you know, that doesn't make me too nauseous thinking about those. So she had a friend that actually drove from Colorado Springs, went to the grocery store, and then got to the cars before we were even there, you know?
Yeah, I mean, they're great because, delivery. You know, we think about calories for a lot of just this food. And so it's like, oh, great. One of those is almost 400 calories. That's amazing. You know, so two of those and you get 800 calories. So anyway, probably wasn't the best thing, but the next day we had to go get the rest of the Sangres, you know, which includes like the Little Bear Blanca Traverse. And so big day, you know, in hindsight, gosh, I'm thinking, was that wise? Because like, man, I was pretty beat up at that point. I was super weak. My leg was still hurting a lot, you know, and man, but the good news was if I could just get that day done, that was it as far as the really big legs. Okay. After that, they were all much more manageable. Except, well, one of them ended up being a little harder than planned, but that was a big deal to sort of get that group done, you know. So that's what we did the next day. And I had this original plan that involved, you know, someone driving me up the infamous like Lake Como Road, you know, super rough to sort of get me on Little Bear. But you know, because of the messed up plan, our friend Kyle wasn't available, you know. So then thinking about it, I came up with a new plan, which was just to drive up to the Herfano trailhead, which is the standard way to do Lindsay. And there's a way to just do a big loop of all those peaks right there. There's Herfano, Lindsay, Blanca, Little Bear, Ellingwood, and California Peak. And so there's this big loop you can do right there. And it's almost all on ridge lines. And some of them are difficult. Like there's one of them's rated like a 5.4. It's only one spot on it. So it's not like continuous class 5.4, but it's fairly tedious, like class 4 going up there. And then there's the Little Bear Blanca Ridge, which is like got to be one of the best in the state, just in terms of a sheer exposure. You know, it's totally exposed on both sides, and it's amazing how much. I don't know if you've ever done that, but that's like an amazing route. Beautiful. And so, but this loop that I did required me to do it twice. I had to go out to Little Bear and back to Blanca.
Oh, you know? That's right.
And so, which I actually thought was kind of cool. Like, you know, I thought that'd be fun. I had also done the Maroon Bells twice. You know, and I had never done the route going from Blanca to Ellingwood, so it was kind of a fun idea, but I was kind of like moving slow that day, you know, and now some storms were starting to move in, you know, this was the day that we were supposed to be starting to get some moisture, you know, and so you know, I mean, I did Herfano, Lindsay, and I'm moving okay, but feeling kind of slow, and you know, I mean, I've done that, you know, Blanca to Little Bear Traverse in you know, like an hour 10 before. So I was hoping to be fast, but I think it was more like an hour 40, you know, which is just a little demoralizing because that's each way, you know, so it's like there's an extra hour gone just like that. Meanwhile, I hadn't accounted for the fact that not only was I not hungry, or no, I was nauseous, and so I didn't want to eat anything. But there was no water because I was on these ridges all day long. So I basically have like 2 water bottles to last me the whole day. I had refilled on the way up Lindsay. So I had drunk a lot there, you know, I'd sort of gorged myself. But at that point, there was nothing but snow. And so I tried to refill, you know, if you have a water bottle that's like half full of water, you can add snow to it and it'll melt the snow, you know, but you have to be careful. You can't get too thirsty and drink all your water because you can't just put snow in a bottle, right, and expect it to melt. It'll just stay frozen, you know. So anyway, so, you know, I'm on these ridges, and then that ended up just being the most brutalizing night as well, just because it was raining, and I'd never done the ridge that goes from Ellingwood north towards California Peak, and it's super long and much more difficult than Roach gives it credit for, in my opinion. You know, super tedious. And I get to California Peak, and oh yeah, back at Blanca, you know, looking at California, it's so far away. It's just like, oh, you know, and I've got an hour of daylight, you know, and it's so far away. So I know it's probably going to take me all night, you know, which is just this horrible thought. And it did, you know, in the rain, you know. And so, but, you know, so about 6 a.m, you know, right as it was getting light, I finally popped out, and, you know, and Andrea the good news was, because I'd made it this big loop, she got to be fully rested. You know, she just got to stay there, nothing to do.
Yeah. And, you know, and that might seem like nice, but honestly, that's not easy for me, you know, to be 24 hours away from Andrew and, you know, to really be on the go, but then also just being there by myself in my car, like, you kind of get a little stir crazy thinking about it, get a little lonely. And so it's like, I do, you know, I try to sleep, right? So, and you know, something about us, like, we can, you know, really sleep anywhere, anytime, which is really nice. And so, you know, but I sleep until like 11 and then kind of dink around a little bit, organize. That was a big thing for crew. It was just all the organization.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
You know, that takes a lot. You know, there's a lot of organizing, and a lot of, like, when I'm unorganized, it's like my brain is cloudy. I can't focus. I can't do anything. It's like, I need to get organized. So that was a big deal. So, you know, did some organizing and and then just waiting. And so then I hiked in a little bit, but it's just, you know, so that was definitely the longest day by myself. You know, usually it's this whole record there, you don't stop. And, you know, for both of us, we don't stop. But that was definitely a day where it was time away from Andrew wasn't the easiest, you know, for sure.
I guess one nice thing for me too was, at that point, I kind of felt confident we were going to finish. You know, it was like, I think we were down to around 20-ish peaks left to go. Something like that. Like I said, I never really knew how many peaks I have left once I got totally whacked up on day one, you know. And but at that point, it was like, looking at the peaks we had left, it was some like stragglers, you know, that I'd missed in the Saw Watch. And there was actually one leg I'm not really giving full credit to that was kind of difficult in the Saw Watch, which was Lackawanna, you know, Casco, Frasco, French Benchmark, Elbert, you know, then Massive in Oklahoma. So that ended up being kind of a big deal.
That was a big deal. And also, like, one of our like massive miscommunication events, you know.
But then after that, I would just sort of be in the you know, the 10-mile mosquito range, and I was just sort of like, yeah, those are like, you know, some quick ones, you know, because if you think about it, if my plan was 20 days, 100 mountains, you know, actually I did a bunch of extra mountains too, you know, like ones that I probably ended up doing like 110. But basically the plan is, you know, to do 5 a day, and that would get you to, you know, get you 20 days, get 100 peaks, right?
Wow.
But there were days like, you know, hikes where I got 1, and there was other days too where I'd only gotten 1 or 2 peaks in. And so I was really looking forward to 10-mile mosquitoes. Like, yeah, I'm going to crank out like 9 in one day here and stuff. I'm really going to finish strong, which ended up being the case, you know. But actually, there is this other funny story. Yeah. And wait, I want to tell it because Andrea goes on to tell the whole story of all these messages back and forth.
You're hearing it from his side, so just remember that there's 3 sides to every story.
Basically, so what we found out, unfortunately, was that the route going up, well, actually, so this is along the Nolan's course, you know, so I know you're pretty familiar with Nolan's. So, you know, so in Nolan's, you would do Elbert, you'd go over Bull Hill, you know, you'd Elbert from Echo Canyon, Bull Hill, Elbert, drop down Elbert, go over to North Half Moon, you know, Massive, and then out, right? Well, so I didn't really want to go down the fish hatchery way on Massive. You know, it's much easier just to come back to North Half Moon Trailhead, you know, which is the way you go up if you're going north, south to north. And, but we found out, and so I had this big plan. After I drop off of Elbert drops exactly 3,000 feet and gets you to this road. And then you're on this road on your way to the Massive Trailhead. And it's the perfect spot for a bike because it's exactly 3,000 feet down from the summit of Elbert. And that bike can save me several miles, you know. So on my plan, I had a waypoint there for her to take the bike to. And then it was pretty elaborate this time. There's another spot where then, you know, so she would drop the bike off there, go to another point, wait for me there. I get on the bike, drop it off with her, take the shortcut over the North Half Moon Trailhead, probably way too complicated. But in any case, we find out that road is closed going up to the North Half Moon Trailhead. They've closed it off for a big chunk of the summer.
Oh, and, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that threw a wrench into the plans because I'm like, oh crap, I guess I can't get support after doing, you know, Lackawanna, Casco Frasco, French, and Elbert. I guess there's not going to be support. So I'll just have to go do Massive in Oklahoma, and then just drop down to the fish hatchery. That was what I figured the plan would be. But then, you know, as she's looking into it, she discovers that, well, it's just a few miles down the road from like the standard trailhead of Massive, you know, so it's like 4 or 5 miles. And so she could potentially hike up, you know. So then I'm like, well, great, let's go back.
He's like, great, yeah, do it.
Great. So you can push the bike up, you know, to you know, this waypoint that I have off at Elbert. I can ride the bike. It'll be great, you know. So anyway, I'm hiking along that day, and man, I made a stupid mistake on Elbert. But I mean, for Nolan's, I was trying a different route, you know, saw a bunch of scree, but then it got dark on me, and so I lost a bunch of time. Drives me nuts because I should know Nolan's better than that by now, you know. But anyway, so we're communicating, right? And so as I'm doing these peaks, it's now dark. She's pushing up the bike, right? And she gets to this river crossing, and she's like, you know, there's this river crossing, and I don't know where to go. You know, it's funny because I had drawn these routes on her map thing, so she could follow them. But the one route went up to North Half Moon Trailhead, you know, where Massive starts, and the other route, I actually started it on the other side of the river. So there wasn't a route going across the river. She didn't really know where to go. And so she's like, well, you know, I'd have to go through the water. I don't really want to. And so I get this message. Basically, it says to that effect, right? So, you know, when I get the message, you know, unbeknownst to me, it's like an hour has gone by since she sent it. So I'm like, that's no problem. Just go take the bike to North Half Moon Trailhead. See you there. Everything's fine, you know. And meanwhile, she's going along. She decides to go across the river, and she's hiking along, sending me other texts, you know. And when I start getting them, I'm like, well, why isn't she back at North Half Moon? I said, just go to North Half Moon Trailhead. Everything will be fine. And she's like, well, I've already crossed the river.
There was one text message that I sent him before I crossed the river. And then I was already crossed the river hiking up, you know, because I have to hike up. I don't know how many, was it a couple thousand?
Oh, no, it's not that far. Not even 1,000. Probably like, you know, 400 feet or so. Or maybe 500.
It's got to be more than that. Yeah. Well, anyway, so it's just, I'm trying to text, satellite message him and hike the bike up. So it's just, the time is going really slow. And so to me, everything is just amplified. Like, I'm like, God, this feels like I'm just going forever. I'm going for hours. And so he gets one of my messages where I'm at the river previously. And he's like, great, looks like you're in the right spot. Stay at North Half Moon. And I'm like, it's like an hour has already gone by. And I'm like, no, I'm coming up to MTB4. Like, that is where I'm going. And so we're going back and forth with all these delayed satellite messages.
And I'm just like, at first I was getting more messages. I kept saying, just go back to the North Massive Trailhead. I was like thinking about, I'm like, that'll just be the easiest anyway.
And at this time,
then, you know, I mean, I don't get that much benefit from the bike ride anyway. And then you'll just be there.
But I knew he wanted me up at Mountain Bike 4 from previous messages. I knew he wanted me up there, and I always want to show up for him. Right. And so now at this time I'm at the second river crossing, which I've learned in our satellite messages is, well, if I don't cross that river crossing, then I've done nothing, because he really benefits from the bike after that second river crossing, because before that it's just complete crap. It's just
bumpy. I'm hiking the bike anyway. Yeah.
But so it's dark now on me, and I'm just like, we decided that I'm just gonna stay put right there. And I don't know if he so I'm stay put for like a half hour, and I'm just like have all these negative thoughts, and I'm like trying to sleep, and there's bugs crawling all over me, and then I get up and I move to a rock, and I'm like, surely the bugs will stay away from me because I won't be laying on the ground. Well, I'm like got my sleeping bag on my shoulders, and I'm like just trying to like go like my head in my knees, and like I feel this like nibble on my foot, like wake up. I swear it is a huge rat.
I still don't believe her.
Andrew doesn't believe me. I am like, how can you not believe me? It's like this huge freaking thing. I'm like, what? WTF? Like I'm like in a horror movie. So I'm like, this is ridiculous. So I decided, I was like, I'm crossing the river and I'm going. Like, I'm just gonna do this. And so I ended up crossing the river, and because from the other side of the river, it just looks really, I'm like, where is he going to bike down? I just didn't see a spot where he was going to bike. And that happens to me a lot. I'm like, this is too hard. And then he's like, and then he finds a way to do it. Well, so here I was like, I didn't even know where the trail was. I was so confused. It was just looked so rocky everywhere. I was like, where does he plan on riding down? And so eventually I found it. I found it, and I was like, oh, okay. So then I get back on the trail, and he's texting me that he's 2 miles away from me, that he does want me to hike up. So I am hiking up, and that was delayed because literally 3 minutes later I see his light, and so we meet up. And so basically I've done nothing because I was supposed to hike the bike up a little bit further from there. So that was a little depressing. We got to each other. We're both annoyed. Not like we're both really annoyed, but it was fine. It all ended up being fine, but we were annoyed at the miscommunication, not necessarily at each other. It was just annoyed. We were annoyed that we realized that we were over communicating and we weren't letting the messages go through, and that I feel like I failed him. And so it was more of just like unfortunate that it happened. It was
really frustrating. It just goes to show that, like, even with the satellite pings, it's not the same as being able to text back and forth on your phone, because the messages can be so delayed, you know? And so by the time I get a message and I'm responding, it's been an hour. And then by the time she gets my response, it's been an hour. And so we were both, I was kind of pissed at her when I got to her. I was like, I mean, I sent her like 5 or 6 messages in a row saying the same thing, just to try to make the point. Like, hey, this is what I want you to do. Go to North Massive Trailhead, go to North Massive Trailhead. And then later it was like, well, if you're not going to go back to North Massive Trailhead, keep going up the road. Don't stop at that second river crossing, you know? And the message just didn't get across. And from her point of view, it was the same thing, but it was like, well, you know, why, because whatever.
I was like, why would I go back? I'm all the way already up here. Right. I'm not going to go all the way back down.
So anyway, that was the big lesson though. There was like, man, we were just over communicating, you know, and it was just tough because we were really frustrated, but it actually ended on a really high note, because when we did hike, we I rode the bike, you know, kind of ahead of her, and then I'd stop and wait for her to catch up. And then we sort of hiked the bikes up to North Half Moon Trailhead, and that's where we slept. And we had like the best night of sleep ever. I think we both felt.
Yeah. I brought his like really good. I brought this really big sleeping pad that we had, and I mean not really big, but it's a backpacking one, but it's wide, and we had one sleeping bag, so we shared the sleeping bag. But we just set it out. We were just in this like little camping area, little field of pine needles, and it was amazing. And we just passed out so hard, and we just slept. And Andrew had a great ride down on his bike. He rode down on his bike, and I hiked down to the North Half Moon, which then I realized how not far we were from North Half Moon. It took like 10 minutes.
So when I was like, just go back to North Half,
I was like,
she was like, oh, maybe that wasn't such like an insane request,
so insane, you know? But it just seemed like an eternity hiking up the bike. And so it just, everything was so skewed in my mind. But so then he ended up waking up early at like 4 a.m. But
you know, that was actually kind of cool because of that closure. You know, that's actually something people might want to pay attention to in the future. Because of that closure, that was a really neat day because there was nobody there on Massive on that site.
Yeah, that was nice.
It was like, so it was kind of neat. It was like there were no cars up there. And so, but you could still get up there via bicycle. And actually that's what woke me up, was a couple bikers sort of biked by where we were sleeping. Okay. And so then anyway, so that's how we sort of dealt with that road being closed, you know. So then we left the bike there, and I went and did Massive in Oklahoma. Oklahoma, by the way, kicked my butt. I had never quite made it. Andrea, we were once gonna scout it out, and Andrea got like an injury that day, and she had to back out. And
which actually ended up leading to my knee surgery, which was,
which has been a great thing.
That's been a great thing. Yeah.
But so I hadn't done Oklahoma, and then that really kicked my butt. It looks like this nice grassy ridge, and it's just full of cliffs and stuff, But anyway, so got out of there okay. And then thinking, and then finally, I was after we were all finished, I was looking back at my pictures and some of the videos I was taking along this thing. Sometimes I try to do this because I never used to do this in the past, and I'm really sad because in the past I don't really have great documentation of some of these big things I've done. Whereas this time Andrea did such an amazing job on Instagram and writing a story up, and so I feel like I'll really be able to remember it better. And I've been trying to be better by every once in a while just do a little video for myself just to remember how the day was going and stuff. And looking back at them, they were all so negative, and everything was just misery this and misery that. Until finally, that last day when I was like, man, I'm feeling strong today, and that was on Grays and Tories. And so it was nice to finally get through all this, the injuries, the weather, all this stuff, these big legs that are just, so destructive on the body, and yet to still finish strong. That felt really good,
We've got one more story for that, for one of our biggest stories probably, and it's the one that you mentioned with cars breaking down, which our car didn't break down, but the battery did die, and that's a pretty amazing story. And it comes with the kind of a backstory of how we got access to DeCalibron. We were on Holy Cross. We have a friend Kyle who hooked us up with what's his
oh, well, Kyle knows his cousin's name is Ryan, whose wife is
who's the guy?
The guy. I can't remember the actual owner's name. John or something?
John. John.
Okay.
So Kyle got us in contact through people with John, and essentially
he's the owner of the peaks up there, the owner of the summit of Democrat Lincoln and Broad.
And so he ends up calling me. We're on Holy Cross. We're coming off of Holy Cross. It's now dark, and he calls me, and so we end up he's like, great, come, but I'm not in town, so you have to come to Littleton.
He's like, if you drive to Littleton, you can get the waivers
tomorrow when we're supposed to be on DeCalibron. And he's like, and come sign the papers. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going to Littleton tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
And so
but he was a little concerned because he's kind of this old sort of fashion guy, and so we were like, well, is there anything we could sign online, or anything like that? And at first I was like, listen, I promise I would never sue you no matter what, But of course he's like, well, you can't do that. And so then we were like, well, what if, Andrea came in, signed her waiver there, and then brought a waiver to me, and we took a picture of it and sent it to him before we hiked.
Then we'll deliver the actual piece of paper that Andrew signs after the record.
Yeah, which we did 4 days later.
Okay.
He's
great. I love him. I love the guy. I'm like, could you be my grandpa? I mean, he's awesome. So.
I'm really sympathetic to his situation up there of the liability that he faces.
He wants people to climb the mountains, and so he just needed to figure it out. He's I feel like unlike other people who own land, he wants people on that land, and he wants people to enjoy it, and he is excited about that, but he doesn't want to get sued, which is understandable. So anyway, so we get permission. That's another example of crew members not getting sleep because, we get off of Holy Cross, and I have to drive now to, what did you do that next day?
Oh, well, I started with Horseshoe.
Right. Horseshoe. So now now I'm driving over there through the night, and then literally we get there and he starts hiking, and I have to book it to Littleton. And then after that, now I'm climbing DeCalibron with him.
And I'll say too that I would much rather be the one hiking, because I cannot stay awake if I'm tired driving. So I've had to turn around and drive to Littleton. Oh, that would have just been horrible.
Yeah, it was big deal for me because then after I pick up the papers, I'm hiking DeCalibron with him, and then after that, I'm hiking down and driving around to pick him up. So both of us were just, I was like, God, at least he got to sleep in the car, but I was wiped. And so we get permission to hike to Calibron. We're on top of maybe, I don't know, Lincoln, and we're looking over, and we're looking at his next route.
And the nice thing about being able to do DeCalibron is it opens up this link up with Clinton, which is a Centennial that's connected via this ridge to Democrat. Whereas if I hadn't been allowed up there, I would have had to do Clinton kind of by itself, which I'd never done. I'd never done Clinton sort of from the route that I'd have to be going up and down. And but now, so now I get to link it up with Democrat, which is great. But that is a technical route. Like the North Ridge of Democrat is surprisingly technical. You know, and actually there's some pretty technical ridges just all the way along that ridge line. But but it still would have to be better than coming, you know, than driving around and going up and down Clinton by itself, you know. And so anyway, but you can see what I had found on the satellite, you know, photos was there's a road, you know, that so if I could just get off Clinton, get down to this road, I'm going to be home free, get down to this, you know, reservoir where she's going to be waiting for me.
And we can see it on the summits. We're like, wow, that's a huge road. That all you have to do is easy. Just get there.
Because earlier in the day, I'd had this kind of miserable Willow experience coming off of Dyer Peak. You know, it's like I did Horseshoe, Sherman, and Dyer, and I was trying to take one of Roach's like adventurous routes again, and it just landed me in like willows and mud. And so I was kind of cursing Roach that day. So we're looking over there, and I think I was commenting, well, look at what I had to go through on Dyer, because it's this huge valley of just nothing but willows. But the difference was, at least this time there was a road, you know, so I was going to be on this road. It was going to be great. Yeah. So anyway, we go over to Democrat. That's the last of the Calibron and that we had to do. And then we said goodbye because she was going to go back to the car, drive around to where she was picking me up. And I had to go over to the Clinton on this ridge, and now it's dark. And so I had kind of forgotten from a few years ago when I'd climbed this ridge how there is a really technical spot. You know, I remembered that it was going to be a challenge, but man, it really threw me for a loop in the dark. I had a hard time. Probably one of the scariest spots I was in on the whole thing was on freaking Democrat, you know, just trying to climb around this like spire thing on this ridge, right? And so then I get, you know, and then it's this, like, you know, it's dark, so the ridge lines always take forever, and get to Clinton. So now I'm just following this route that I had just sort of drawn in on my map, you know, with the satellite train. And I get down to this road thinking that, well, okay, I've done it. You know, I'm down to the road and I'm home free. But I didn't realize that was where the battle was really beginning for the night, you know, and it was surprisingly wet up there. There was all kinds of like just water, like in the road and everywhere. And what that road ended up being, well, first of all, it was super gnarly. There was unbelievable obstacles that these cars are going over, like unbelievable. It's like, you know, Lake Como all over again, plus some, in my opinion. But so you get down, and in this willow zone down there, it was so wet. It was like this swamp, you know, it's like you're going through a lake that's lined with willows, and it had rained earlier in the day. So all the willows were soaked. And so you couldn't even like try to go around them, you know? And so I ended up having to wade through all these like water, you know, it was just miserable. I hated every second of it. And it was just dragging on and on and on, you know? So then finally I get out to the main road, but because I'm in that range to meet the 3,000 foot rule, I can't have her waiting for me there. I have to hike down the road for another couple miles to try to drop 3,000 feet from Clinton, you know? So I hike, and I see her car, you know, and I get to it, we'll wake her up. She goes to turn on the car and it's dead, you know?
Nothing.
And you know, man, that car, you know, it's her 4Runner. It's been solid. It just hit 100,000 miles. It's never broken down, nothing.
But
we don't even know what she left on.
I knew I had to have left something on because, but when I went to bed to lay down, I don't, it must have been like my really low lights on daylight. I don't know, but something was left on.
But it's a bad spot because it's, you know, it's probably like, I think 1 or 2 in the morning, you know, we were hoping just to like drive straight over to Quandary.
Yeah.
You know, and she hasn't seen a car all night, you know.
And we're in there. We're in there by the reservoir. There's no cell service. We're in there miles and miles and miles. We're in.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm like, what are we going to do? So, well, so you mentioned TJ. So we were supposed to be meeting him that next day for Quandary. And so I guess we didn't really think about, I don't think we had a satellite tracker information, because if we did, we could have satellite messaged him. But we were like, well, we could message his sister, which she's not going to get that until the morning. And then she'll have to come out here. And
it was just
going to put us hours and hours and hours behind. And we're just like, crap.
Meanwhile, we wouldn't be able to turn on her car. So I couldn't use those puffy leg things, you know, it was going to get cold. It was just going to be really ugly. But then just right then, like literally waiting for a 2 minutes of like, oh crap, what are we gonna
2
do?
minutes.
A car shows up.
Not even.
No
We
way.
see headlights, and Andrew's like, "Oh my God, there's headlights!" And I was
No.
like, "What?" And so this car comes, and they're just coming down to us. What are they doing? I have no idea. And we're like, "Do you guys have jumper cables?" And they were like, Andrew asked that, and all I hear was the guy just saying like, "Yeah, we do."
They were like, the lady was like, "We're gonna hook you guys up."
Oh, really? Oh, that's funny. And so we get hooked up, and at first it doesn't work, and we're like, okay, because we tried to use my mini startup, it just no good. And so we tried to get the car started, it didn't work. 10 minutes later, still doesn't work. They're like, well, let's just sit on it. Sometimes the car's so dead you have to sit with the cables hooked up. And so I was kind of doubting. We were feeling bad. We were like, nah, it's okay. And so then we're like, well, we'll just give it a try. So we did. We sat for a little bit, and then lo and behold, we got the car started, and it was incredible. I was like, you guys seriously saved us. It was amazing.
It really felt like a miracle. Because, and the fact that we didn't really lose any time. We didn't lose time.
We didn't have to jump through hoops. And then it was cool because the next day we did Silver Heels, and hiking up, we at like kind of at sunset, we were kind of coming down from the summit. There was just these huge sunbeams just right over the reservoir where my car was.
I've never seen one like that. It made this perfect golden triangle right on the reservoir, this sunbeam. It was like a patch of gold, like from this thing, right where she had been parked down there.
Yeah, it was so cool. And so it was just such a sweet memory for us. We were like, wow, that is so cool. Like, so that was just amazing. So I don't know, that was just such a crazy experience, but we haven't really given you any opportunity to ask any questions. So,
no, you guys have covered it all.
So unique in the people that you do podcasts with, because it's probably and you were probably used to Q&A, and you're just Q, and we're just all A. So
I love this. I can just shut up and you guys just go and go and go. I love it. Make my job easy.
So are there like other questions that you are like want to ask us?
I think we've covered most of like the hardest nights. I did have my best day was like the next day, like where I finally was feeling strong, and I was motivated because I didn't want to be messing with lungs in the dark, because that like nailed me in 2015, the snowstorm up there. So I was like fighting for every single minute that day.
Yeah, he was finally meeting his splits. The last 2 days were finally him meeting splits. And
they actually pulled up the Excel document, and like it's something like peak 83. They're like, hey, you're back at where you're
doing okay.
You're supposed to be peak 83. It's great. Everything before, nothing on track. Everything was messed up. Peak 83. We're going peak to peak now, baby. And then finally he's meeting his splits the last 2 days. He's feeling good. He's strong. And then our friend Max meets up with us for longs, and we cranked that out. Like
he knew there's all these shortcuts that people that like really love longs know.
Yeah.
And this guy called the Ranger Trail, and
the Ranger Trail,
okay, and he knows, he's one of these guys that knows all the different variations of it, and so I just let him lead the way. So
we did Meeker and then longs, and really it surprised us to summit longs in the light. We didn't think we were going to get that. We just wanted to get, the certain hard spots over with in the in the light. And we got to the summit. Right. I mean, we had maybe 5 minutes of light left, and it was pretty incredible. It was such a high for us. And, we joke we should have finished and then started the record over, because then he's so strong and he's feeling great. So might as well just start it all over again.
I was really surprised because I was actually putting the hurt on Max. He's super fit. He goes to Stanford. He's super fit, going there like on a full ride on their track and field team, And so to be hurting Max, who we had climbed Quandary once before, and I mean, he made me cry for mercy, so it was nice to
it was nice to put him out of breath.
We did
it.
So, like hurting a little.
So that was kind of fun. But,
that's so cool. I can listen to you guys all night. This has been fantastic, you guys. I really appreciate you guys taking the time. This has been it's been just awesome. So we talked about the lows. We talked about some highs. I mean, I'm guessing we pretty much covered all the standout memories too. Like looking back, now you're a few weeks removed. Was it like a month ago or so you finished this?
Yeah, when did I finish? You remember what day it was? Let's see.
What's today's date?
26th.
Today's
Today's the
18th.
18th.
It was.
Yeah, it was about a month ago.
Like a month ago.
Yeah, I finished on like the wasn't it like
19th
the
or
9th?
something?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
Okay.
about a month.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like, what are
Yeah.
your thoughts looking back on this? Are you pretty satisfied with it? Or do you feel like you could go back and take it down to 18 or 19 days?
Honestly, I'm really satisfied. It's
Mhm.
what's satisfying about it is it kind of reminds me of the first time I went for the 14er record when I was like 24. I hadn't researched it all. It was like the battle of my life at that point. And I did like 14 days. I mean, or just under 14. I barely beat the previous record by like an hour. But it was just, it really changed who I was in the sense that I had accomplished something that was so hard and I hadn't quit. And so at that point on, I feel like I always had this confidence that I could overcome things, and that became sort of my MO. It's like, I may not be fast, but I can suffer, and I'm not going to quit. And, listen, I have quit some, I will say, but, it would take a lot to make me quit,
Yeah, that's definitely your strength.
Right. And so it's satisfying like that one was, and then later when I set the 14er record in 2015, I took like basically 4 days off that previous record, right? From just under 14 to just under 10.
Wow.
So clearly that wasn't the fastest it could have been done, but I really was satisfied just from the battle and surviving it. And that's what this felt a lot like. It was just like, from wanting to just sort of stop at day one just because the conditions seemed so ridiculous and being so beat up. I also had, I was constantly fighting these tendon injuries and swelling. And like, I've got a hernia now that got caused by this whole thing. I don't know where I got it, but now I've got that that's kind of causing me some pain. And, so just, it's very satisfying. And I really don't have any desire to better the record. If anyone else wants to come and get it, that's, I really don't care. In the sense that they can beat the record. That would be great.
This was kind of more of like a personal accomplishment that he's been wanting to do for a long time. This wasn't really for, hey, we're going to go out and set this FKT thing. Totally. It was more of just like,
I don't expect any of those records to stand because there are people that are so fast, but this is so massive, I think that big. it takes a lot. It's not just like some fast person can come out and do it. It takes a lot. Another idiot. Another complete fool.
But like I said, it's more like we're not looking to go out and better what we did. It's we have other plans, we have other goals, and we just are really happy with the experience.
Good.
But I will say, like, it does, man, I really just I've spent a lot of time on the 14ers, like a lot of time.
Yeah, you have.
Yeah, well, finally, for years I was sad because a lot of people will document every single hike they've ever done, and so they'll know exactly how many 14ers they've done. Man, I never kept track of that stuff, so I would do a lot of these, I hear when I did the biking thing, I was doing all kinds of peaks and training for that, didn't keep track of it. Finally, Andrea wanted me to let's think of all the ones you've done for sure. I did them all once as a kid. I did them with my first son, Axel, or Calvin, then Axel. There was, all these other records. Yeah, so I did a ton of them, right? And so when we add it all up, it's now with this one, it's something like 800 peaks.
Yeah, he's just shy of 800.
So I'm thinking, well, that's a goal. Maybe to hit 1,000 is like a lifetime goal. Right?
That'd be fun.
But the thing is, I feel like maybe I've spent too much time on just the 14ers, right? I probably should have done a lot of the 13ers and stuff. And now it's just like when you do one of these really busy peaks, like I just really like it prime time hours. You can go to Bierstadt. You can actually have a great time on Bierstadt if you go at a non-standard hour,
right?
But if you go up there on a Saturday morning, it's just not my thing. There's so many people,
right?
And all these individuals, are probably neat people that it would be fun if it was just you and them. You meet them, probably a neat person, but when there's a million of you, you just really want to put your head down and not talk to anyone, And so the 13ers are great. They're neat. It's kind of like a throwback to the day when there wasn't this gigantic trail with mountain high cairns that, you had to, it was more of an adventure, as Roach would say, an adventurous way to climb a mountain,
It's the sporty route.
Yeah.
So I really do. I am interested in 13ers, and we've talked to people afterward, and they've made some suggestions, and so yeah, we're thinking, maybe we could look around some of the surrounding states for some other neat things to do. It's sort of how we sort of plan our vacations, is looking for some big route we could do, and then we might have to go scout it and stuff like that. And that'll, and that'll be our vacation one day. We'll go beat ourselves up,
Nice.
and the next big ones we'll probably do as a team, because it's kind of hard, just, to have one person be support. Right. Although I really wouldn't mind supporting her. On something big, if it came to that. But probably the next big thing we'll do as a team again.
Joint effort. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Andrea, you said that you kind of wanted to use this as training to get into better shape. Was that for anything specific? Is anything coming up in your future? You training for anything?
Well, I just didn't want to waste a month. First of all, I didn't want to waste a month of just being on support, eating his support food, which is cookies and cake, and gain 10 pounds while he's out there getting in the best shape of his life. Right. So I'm like, no, hell no, I'm going to get in shape too. And I'm going to be in the best shape of my life. So that was kind of the original drive. And then, we're also thinking like, well, we don't want to waste the fitness that we have from this. We both came out of this in very good shape.
Super fit.
Yeah. And it's really cool because I came out of it super fit, not super beat up. He came out of it super fit, super beat up. Right. Not really. Not until like weeks later. He's my knees are aching.
Right afterward, we went and when we climbed, we just like the couple days later, we climbed a couple like Raising Tories or something.
We did great, and so he was, so coming out of this, he's doing really good. He's hurting a little bit.
And she's been consistently climbing. I've been having to do work, like I use all my vacation for this thing, but she's been up climbing a lot of peaks. She's probably more fit than I am.
So but basically I knew that I was gonna come out of this fit, and so we have, like we were talking about, we have some big goals. We actually sat down the other day to talk about it. We have a few really big goals that could be potentially that we do as a team. And then we have other smaller goals that also potential. A lot of our goals and adventures that we want to do, we're really like, screw it, let's just make this all co-ed. We do really well together out there. It's super fun together out there. Let's just keep it up, And so I knew that the 24-hour record has just been kind of on my mind. Just get it done, get it over with. Some of these have been on my mind for so long. I'm like, let's just do it and get it over with.
She's talking about like climbing the most 14ers in a 24-hour period.
Gotcha.
And so that was kind of what was in my mind. I'm like, okay, well, after this, since we're not going to do anything really big together this summer, because we spent that on his record this year. And so I was like, well, we could do a couple small things, and so I'm not super excited about that one right this minute because I was just in Chicago Basin. And so I think over Labor Day, we're just going to go out there and do the 17-mile hike in, climb the peaks, and do the 17-mile hike out and set an FKT for it. So that's kind of
the Chicago Basin.
The boys is way out of my league.
Yep. So that would be mine.
Hers,
and so and it's short, it's sweet. We can do it. And I mean, we're thinking maybe 16 hours. And so just maybe that's, cutting it short a little bit. Maybe it'll take a little long, not sure, but it was just, I wanted something for me this summer, like one or two things. Maybe if I feel really good on that, then I'm like, hey, let's do the 24-hour. But we actually want to do the crest, like a mini Crestones, FKT Crestones loop in there. And so we have a little bit of scouting to do and kind of figuring out times and stuff with that. So it just seems more logical. Like if we just want to bang something out really quick this summer for what the time we have left, is to just go into Chicago Basin, since I was just there and it's fresh in my head and we can just get in and get out.
Yeah.
So
yeah, totally. Wow.
Yeah. But we've got other big ones planned out. We just really have to sit down and kind of talk about and discuss and plan.
Kind of like our life sort of goal though, is like we're continuously trying to just keep doing something, and so just like every day we try to get in a workout, I mean, I still haven't missed, even after doing the whole Centennials thing, I never missed a workout day.
Mm.
You know, I mean, a lot of those workout days were super, just getting on my bike on the trainer and spinning for like a half hour, stuff, super easy.
But just to always keep moving. I mean, isn't that the key to life? You always just need to keep moving, and then you'll be
100%.
moving for a really long time. So
you know, it seems like in my past, it was always this big cycle, which is natural. You know, usually in winter, you know, and I still do even when I'm working out all the time, but you gain weight in winter, you get more fit in summer. And there'd be this big cycle. We're just trying to even out those highs and lows and keep it at a higher sort of
keep
like
ourselves from starting over, because when you don't have to start over and start your training over, then it's so much easier to prepare and to get into your summer training, you know?
Yeah.
Well, you guys make such a good team. You're both so good together, and you guys support each other so well. It's really admirable. It's pretty awesome that you guys found each other and you make it work this way.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Were there any moments of arguments out there? Were there any moments of, Andrew, I hate you?
No,
not that.
Was it pretty smooth?
Not that intense.
Good.
But there were definitely moments where like, you know, it's stressful for the support.
Big time
support crew, right? Because especially, you know, I think it was a lot better in 2015 where I was really hitting my splits. So it was like, man, it's like if I said I was going to be in a certain time, I'd be there, or maybe even be 10 minutes early, you know? And so they didn't have to worry about stuff like that. But this time there's sort of a lot of, well, you know, hopefully I'll be at this time, then I'll be a couple of hours late, you know, but at least
that would never lead to like anger.
Right. But I feel like it added to the stress level, because there were lots of times when I would come in and Andrea would like be in a bad mood or something, right? For various reasons.
Right. So like, I would say the worst of it was just the stress level. Nothing was ever like, I would always tell him, like, I'm not mad at you, you know, you're not what I'm at. I'm just stressed, you know, and I've got, you know, stuff to do. And, you know, this wasn't our best communication day. And so I'm just stressed out. And so, you know, and I tried not to like show it that much, you know, because coming back to the car, I know he always really looked forward to it. And so I would say just like the most frustrated we got was on that communication day when we were going up massive. When I was meeting him for massive.
That was probably the most I was annoyed with her.
Yeah.
Just because like I kept sending out that same text over and over. But it was funny after we met up and we were kind of like going, well, why'd you do this? And why'd you do that? It was like, you know, and then we're hiking down the trail, you know, everything's fine. And it's like, you know, message notification.
Yeah.
So now we're getting in some of the messages we had sent before,
Okay.
you know, it was just that delayed.
Yeah. And so like, honestly, people are like, well, gosh, how do you do it? It's such a high stress environment. And honestly, this is like the mountains and things like this, no matter what we go through out there, is where we reconnect. It's where we connect. It's where we have really some of the highest moments in our relationship. And it's where we are really like, wow, we're really meant to be together. So I'd say most of like our hardest moments are when we're at home, you know? And so when we're days and days and days in the mountains going through a hard time out there, that's like where we grow closer and grow stronger. And that's kind of where our strongest points lie. So probably the opposite for a lot of people, you know, it's put couples out there and they'll fall apart. You know, it's kind of for us, we grow together.
And for me, you know, one of the best things of any day is when you get back to the car, you know, you're just like so desperate to come around the corner and see the car, and you know, and so it's such a good feeling to get there. And then Andrea's there taking care of me. So it's usually this really great feeling. You know, there was one time when I was like, got there and she seemed like she was in kind of a bad mood. So I was like, you are not allowed to be in a bad mood right now.
Yeah. I mean, there's
I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, like there's definitely some bickering going on, right? If that's what you want to call it. There's for sure bickering. I mean, I don't think we go a day without bickering. But but the overall picture is just we really thrive out there together for sure.
Yeah. After a big adventure like this, is it difficult for you guys to sort of slip back into the real world? Do you have a period of adjustment for like a couple days there, or are you guys pretty good at just turning that around?
It's super hard for me.
It's really hard.
For me, it's like I get you know, I get really depressed kind of, and I feel you know, I feel fit, right? And I like that. And then you just sort of see the weight coming back on, but I gotta work, you know, and like now my training's been sidelined because of this hernia thing. And I tripped at one point and hurt my elbow, and it's been really annoying me lately. And so, that makes push-ups hard, and so it's just sort of depressing. And now school starting, and there's all this. I've got one kid in college, one in high school, one starting high school, one starting middle school. So there's all this, driving kids to school and trying to figure things out. There's just so much to do.
Yeah, like a lot of times, like when we came back, we'd be like, man, like I just wish we could go back into the mountains where we didn't have anything to worry
just
about.
Let me. All I gotta focus on is that next step forward.
Let us climb and eat. Yeah. And then just like getting back into the routine for me is really just like getting back into work. That's always a hard one for me. Right. I struggle with that. So, and then tired. We were so tired for a really long time after this. Like it took us a long time to catch up on sleep for sure.
Yeah. Unreal. What a story. I'm so happy that you guys completed this, because the last time I talked to you was right after you had finished Holy Nolans. And I asked you what the next thing was. And you're like, we're kind of thinking about the Centennial thing. I'm not sure when it's going to happen, but you could tell you were tossing the idea around. And here we are, like a year later, you guys made it happen. So so cool.
So cool to just like make these things real. It's just so cool to accomplish them. And really cool.
It is really satisfying because, I really didn't, I don't know if I thought, I always think I'm going to make it, right? But really, I knew there was a very good chance I wasn't going to finish this. It was almost too big, because the 14er record took me 10 days and I was, beat up, it was like a complete death march. And so it was like, how am I going to make this work twice as long? And so that's, so the plan was to sort of add some more sleep in there and to try to make it sustainable. It certainly wasn't the same pace as before, but I really just didn't know how it was going to go. Am I going to survive the tendon troubles and all this stuff and all the unknowns, which, man, they really hit us. And I feel very fortunate to have had this plan and actually have succeeded. Looking back, maybe it would have, if you were really just focused on the best time, honestly, probably the most ideal thing to happen would be to get halfway through and quit, and because then you learn so much from the one failed attempt, like I did with the 14er record, failing the year before. Then you could really fine tune the plan and nail it. But in this case, I'm just I think I'm happy to sort of check this one off the list and move on to something else, for sure. What a great adventure. And I'm excited to sort of like get my kids up to Centennials now, they've done the 14ers. And so it'll lead to some great adventures and stuff, but I'm excited to put it behind us, and I'm glad we made it too,
Cool. Well, congratulations over and over to you guys. It's such a huge adventure, and you guys overcame so many obstacles out there, which is what makes it even cooler. Like when I heard that you did this, I just have this picture in my head, like, oh, Andrew Hamilton just set this thing up and did it perfectly, and everything went smooth, just like all of his adventures. But it's not really like that. So I love hearing you guys' stories, and I love all the little details about cars breaking down and almost dying on day one. And I love it all. And looking back, that's probably the stuff you guys are going to remember too. So
yeah, it is. I'm glad to be able to talk to you, because as time goes by, I don't remember a lot of the more harder things. You
lose that.
Yeah, you lose the emotion.
You lose the detail.
That's true.
I'll forget how hard it was to like go do that Little Bear Day after the Pikes Day when I was so injured. You forget how hard that was. So you forget all that stuff. So if you don't get out and talk about it or write it down, it breaks my heart. I think of all these great stories I've had that I've just forgotten about, I appreciate being able to tell the story and stuff.
And like talking about just like, just the unknowns and things. There were two things that also happened to Andrew. One was the beginning, like he had this kind of trench foot type thing. We don't really know what it was, but his foot was just wet.
It was wet for about a week. It was just always wet.
And so he had this like patch on the bottom of his foot that just it stayed white, and it was really painful, and it had like these deep cracks in it. And so that could have taken him out easily. It was super painful for him to walk on. His sister ended up putting the skin glue that she had on it, and it really healed up his foot, but that could have easily taken him out if it had gotten worse. Like he was just in a lot of pain with that thing. And then I guess when we were on Silver Heels, just something little that could have been disastrous. Like, you know, his bike crash could have been disastrous, but he tripped over this rock and he landed on his elbow, and he just like laid there in so much pain. And I was like, oh my God, what happened? Like, and I was like, did you break it? You got climbing to do still. And so, and he felt like, you know, it was like, he just was in so much pain. Right today, like, we think that he could have chipped, there could be a chip bone in there. It's still really swollen. And so trying to like get through that, but it was, you know, the next day we saw it was all bloody under his shirt. And I was like, oh, that's why he was so sad, you know, like, so just like little stuff like that. There's just so much that we will like forget in time, you know? And so it's just nice to be able to talk about it on here and just have it, you know, have our memories on here talking with you.
That's why I'm here. I want to document this stuff. I want to hear these stories and I want to get them out there for other people to hear too. So you guys, this has been just such a treat for me. I could listen to you guys all night. So just keep doing what you're doing. I just love it. Yeah, I can't wait
talking to you.
I can't wait till your next adventure, and we'll talk some more. But
keep in touch, and we'll keep in touch and let you know what we're doing next. And it would be super fun to talk again after
absolutely
successful whatever.
It's always fascinating, always inspiring. So just keep it up, you guys.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely, anytime. You guys enjoy the rest of your summer, and talk to you guys soon. See you on the trail.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, bye-bye.